Hey guys, tonight we're swapping tropical beaches for something crisper. You're not applying sunscreen, you're tugging a wool scarf over your nose as Norway's salted wind tries to steal it. The sun's doing its best impression of a lazy house cat here, just a smudge of orange dragging itself along the horizon. Historians still argue whether Vikings used these shores as makeshift trading posts, but your boots crunching on permafrost suggest they had better footwear. You shuffle forward, each step crackling through ice-glazed grass. That coppery scent, iron-rich soil bleeding through thawing ground. That gurgle, a hidden stream fighting its frosty straitjacket. Fun fact, this coast once supplied salt to medieval Europe's herring markets, though I doubt those fishmongers dealt with eyelash icicles. Your gloves fumble with a buckled map case, the paper inside stiff as communion wafer. North bleeds off the edge because cartographers get shy past certain latitudes. A pine cone bounces off your shoulder courtesy of a crossbill too grumpy for small talk. You mutter something unkind about Scandinavian wildlife, then freeze. Between the trees, a figure. No, just a twisted birch wearing frost like a lace shawl. Relax. Or don't quirk of the Arctic light loves playing these games. That drowsy ember sunset blames sulfur particles from Icelandic volcanoes. Or so the textbooks claim. Local legends whisper it's the breath of Jotnar giants snoring under glaciers. Either way, it's colder than a tax auditor's handshake. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. Let's see who's watching from beach towels versus igloo Wi-Fi. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Wind braids itself through pine needles, a sound like radio static from another century. Your breath fogs the air, lingers, then gets drafted into the atmosphere's endless reshuffling. Salt pans glint ahead, shallow pools pretending to be molten lead. Step closer, the mud sucks at your boots with a sound that make a 90s dial-up modem nostalgic. You kneel, ignore the damp seeping through your knees, and skim a hand over brackish water. Fingertips come up glittering, not gold, just halite crystals plotting their slow takeover. Ever licked a glacier? Same vibe, minus the risk of tongue betrayal. That ache in your ribs could be the thin air or the existential weight of knowing this salt might end up rimming a margarita glass in Majorca. Shadows stretch like taffy. Those pines aren't just trees anymore. They're the ribs of some half-buried leviathan. Your headlamp flickers typical, but the aurora's starting its soundless jazz routine overhead. Green ripples, purple staccatos. Scientists say it's solar particles. The Sami reindeer herders say it's the sky's memory of ancient fires. You're just glad it hides the fact that your nose is now a tragic shade of Rudolph. A crunch, too deliberate for nature. You pivot, flashlights slicing the gloom. 2 amber eyes gleam back. Moose, wolf, Norga's bank's currency, printer come to reclaim its scenery. Nope, just a fox lugging a frozen mackerel like it's late for a very fishy potluck. It spares you a glance that says tourists before vanishing into scrub. You press onward, boots leaving scars in the peat. The salt harvesters' huts emerge as crooked silhouettes, wood warped by centuries of brine and blame. One door hangs ajar, squealing like a startled piglet when you nudge it. Inside, rusted tools, a chair with 3 legs, and the distinct aura of former residents who definitely smoked copious amounts of cod liver. The walls hum, not metaphorically, actual vibrations thrumming through timber. Ocean's doing its best cello impression against the cliffs below. You pocket a nail from the floorboards, a souvenir destined to confuse future archaeologists. Outside, the wind starts yowling through rafters. Time to leave, probably. But there's a mittened handprint on the windowpane, smaller than yours, and suddenly the cold feels shared. Moonrise bleaches the landscape, shadows crisp up, no more fuzzy edges. Your thermos surrenders its last drops of lukewarm coffee. It tastes like regret and grounds, but paired beautifully with the realization that your phone died 3 kilometers back. The path homes now a Morse code of boot prints and fox tracks. Halfway to the car, if it's still where you parked it, you pause. Something tugs your sleeve. A bramble, a ghost, just the wind again, auditioning for a horror movie role. You laugh, a short, sharp bark that startles a nearby ptarmigan into flight. Its wings chime the frozen air-like bones, rattling in a velvet sack. By the time gravel crunches under your tires, the northern lights have dimmed to a murmur. Salt grits your teeth, embedded in every crevice. You'll find it tomorrow in your socks, your hair, the cuffs of your jeans. For now, the heater wheezes, promises it can't keep. Norwegian frost already writing its name on the windshield. The gloves feel stiff, like they've absorbed every groan from this shoreline. You haul the wooden rake through brine, its teeth catching on pebbles worn smooth by centuries. Each pull sings a rusty anthem. This same rhythm powered medieval villages. Experts think Norwegian salt-fueled herring preservation as early as the 12th century, though good luck finding a Viking who'd admit it smelled nice. Your arms burn, but quitting means abandoning the pact. Sweat for crystals, blisters for beauty. The tide pool mirrors the sky, a puddle of liquid steel. You spot a hermit crab hitching rides between seaweed castles. Local legend claims they carry messages for drowned sailors. Skeptics called that fisherman's folly until 47, when a trawler found a corked bottle lashed to a crab's back. Inside, a love poem in Old Norse, ink bleached salt white. Coincidence? Sure, romantic, indisputable. Briny paste cakes your gloves, gray diamonds forming in the rake's grooves. Historians still argue whether 13th century harvesters used linen sieves or just cupped hands. Your team sieve all the way these calluses have veto power. A seal pops up downstream, whiskers glinting. For 3 heartbeats, you mimic its head tilt, then it vanishes, unimpressed by your rake technique. Wind stuffs your nostrils with the Atlantic's resume, kelp rot, glacial silt, questionable decisions. Your boots slurp mud with every step, the same sound your granduncle's dentures made at supper. 3 gulls critique your pacing from a driftwood bleacher. RSVP for the buffet, you mutter, flinging a clump of channel rack. They scatter, avian food critics, upholding their Michelin standards. Sweat carves canyons down your spine. You straighten world tilting like a drunkard's compass and spot the rock carvings. Faded swirls mark where Harold Fairhairs, tax collectors, tallied salt barrels, or maybe kids doodled while parents worked. Archaeologists found 6 petroglyphs here last summer. Underneath, someone's modern initials. You trace the Vandals' MG 2001. A century from now, will this be history too? The sieve appears, hand-forged copper, with a handle chewed by generations. Brine drips through, whispering nursery rhymes. Your thumbnail chips off a salt flake. Toss it behind you for luck, like the old crew foreman did. Never mind that 70% walked off the job. Optimism tastes better than reality, salted or otherwise. Clouds bruise the horizon, weather's rolling dice. You count harvest jars 18 brimming, 3 half-filled, 1 cracked and apologetic. 3 staccato taps on the cracked jars, lid granddad's trick to check for microfractures. The wind steals the sound and your chance to outwit physics. Pebbles shift behind you. You spin, rake raised like a halberd, only to face a reindeer calf. Its nose glistens, sniffing your salt-crusted sleeves. Not on the menu, Prince, you whisper. It cocks its head, then bolts, kicking sand onto your work pants. You laugh, the first human sound in hours, as hoofprints rewrite the shoreline's margin notes. Salt collects under your nails, souvenirs you'll find tomorrow in bed. Low tide exhales, retreating from rocks tattooed with barnacle constellations. You name one, cluster the grumpy lobster naming rights, being the sole perk of solitary work. The fetching view, company health plan, existential dread, dental. Twilight bleeds into the jars, each now holds liquid dusk. Your stomach growls a protest movement. Dinner waits back at the shack, cold cod, and the existential crisis of unopened IKEA flatware. For now, you sink onto a boulder worn smooth by 1,000 harvesters. Rests. The rake lies abandoned, just another skeleton on evolution's beach, waiting to fossilize. The copper sieve's handle bites your palm, its vertebrae worn smooth by ghosts of thumbs past. Brine drips through pocked metal, leaving constellations of gray salt. You've read that 14th century Norse laws required copper sieves. Iron would rust and befoul the king's salt. Skeptics called it tax evasion. Copper was pricier than a peasant's patience. Seaweed crunches underfoot, brittle as papyrus scrolls. A strand clings to your boot, whispering gossip only decay understands. Local lore claims coastal witches wove curses into tidal weeds, hence the old habit of burning them at crossroads. You shake it loose, better safe than hexed. The sieve trembles, muscles singing backup vocals to yesterday's overexertion. Tools don't tire, your granduncle used to say. Lies. Everything here tires. Even the cliffs sag toward the sea. You filter another scoop, salt grains piling like glacial till. 17 jars huddle nearby 19th century glass blurs would weep at their lumpy asymmetry. Wind riffles your collar, brings the tang of last week's herring racks. Diesel engines killed those wooden drying frames decades ago. Yet the stench lingers like a bad punchline. Historians still argue whether copper sieves improved salt quality or just lined chieftains' coffers. You vote both the capitalism's been greasy since longships ruled these fjords. A fleck of salt pirouettes into your eye, blinking back tears. You fumble the sieve. It clatters onto shale, scattering crystals like cursed sugar. Norwegian toddlers learn early. Wasted salt invites Mjolnir wielding lectures from ancestors. You pinch 3 grains, toss them left, right, and over your shoulder, a trinity of superstition. Your gloves crackle with each flex, salt-stiffened leather, auditioning for horror movie prop. They're older than your passport. These gloves, bought from a bankrupt fisherman who swore they repelled jellyfish stings. Dubious, yet here you stand, unnettled. Coincidence? Probably. Lucky. Define luck while scenting like a margarita rim. The tide pool before you swirls, microscopic life darting through its mercury surface. Scholars once believed these pools held portals to the underworld, hence Viking funerals launching bodies into tidal zones. You skim the sieve, watch brine vanish like souls through Valhalla's back door. Shadows stretch their claws. The sun's down to embers now. You unearth a whelk shell from the shale, its spiral flawless. Old wives called these mermaid thimbles, crafted by undersea seamstresses, stitching kelp into royalty. You pocket it because irony pairs well with desolation. 3 gulls land nearby, eyeing your salt piles. Banks closed, you announce, shielding the jars. They squawk in unison, feathered mobsters demanding protection money. A seaweed scrap sails your way. They've upgraded to organic projectiles. The last brine load shivers through the sieve, salt mass, now rivaling a toddler's sandcastle. You scrape it into jar 18, its glass mouth yawning. One legend claims thunder god Thor seasoned his stew with grains from this shore, though he'd need a forklift for current portion sizes. Boots suction to mud, you trudge toward the tool shed. The sieve rests against a wall, next to a rusted anvil and a jar of mystery bolts. Generations of hands have polished its handle, smooth except one notched groove. Your fingertip finds it, the 1923 harvester who carved initials during a blizzard, a storm that reportedly birthed 3 new islands or hid 3 drunk cartographers. Seaweed snaps under your heel, its crack echoes like a wishbone. You're too tired for wishes, too Scandinavian to admit it aloud. Wind sneaks through the shed slats, whistling a lullaby older than the sieves, older than the gods, older than salt itself. Shadows stretch toward the fjord, long fingers grasping at twilight. Your boots sink into marsh muck each step, sucking like a leech's kiss. 20 paces out, the water ripples not from fish or wind, but something deeper. Historians note Viking lords buried their ships in tidal flats, their hulls stuffed with swords and sapphires. You squint, those submerged silhouettes could be mast tips, or the fjord's crooked teeth. A cold slice of wind shears through your jacket. You mutter curses your great aunt would have washed from your mouth with lye soap. Local kids dare each other to wade here at midnight, claiming drowned. Warriors grab ankles with barnacle fists. You'd scoffed till now. Salt crusts your lashes, blinking feels like sanding wood. Something glints beneath the peat-stained water. Kneeling, you skim fingers through the chill, pull up a nail pitted by centuries of salt. 10th century, if the triple-riveted head tells true. Toss it back. Gravarobber karma's not on today's agenda. The marsh exhales rotten egg stink of sulfur. Methane bubbles pop like War of the Roses trebuchets if trebuchets burped. Scientists say swamp gas causes phantom fleet mirages, but you've read the diaries. 1890s shepherds swore they saw oarsmen with melted faces rowing at low tide. You pivot toward shore, boots now caked in primordial sludge. A splintered oar protrudes from the muck, or is it driftwood? Debate rages whether Vikings staged rituals here, salt marshes as liminal spaces between Midgard and Hell. Your vote. They partied. Mead, roast boar, and human sacrifice. The original Nordic brunch. Moonlight bleeds through cloud cover, transforming the marsh into a mercury pool. Your breath hitches. That's no wave, it's a cresting shape, longship prow. Seal spine. Gone before you decide. A laugh escapes, nervous chirp of a bird who forgot its migration route. Legends whisper of salt wives, women who bargained with sea spirits to save drowning husbands. Their payment, binding their hair with kelp, then walking into the surf at high tide. Your scarf tightens, sudden phantom pressure at your throat. You hum the lullaby, the one your landlady sang while mending your torn parka. Sov Godt Pact sang din. Her voice had crackled like a fire log. The marsh stills. Even the methane bubbles pause their siege. Coincidence? Absolutely. Comforting. Unsettlingly so. A rock nudges your toe, too angular for nature's work. You kick it over, revealing runes carved by some Iron Age edgelord, translating Viking graffiti. Leif was here also, Thor sucks. Maybe. Your old Norse is rustier than that nail you discarded. Wind sprints across the water, brings a sound like clinking chainmail. You snap, upright, scan the shoreline. Just 2 eider ducks grooming themselves with judgy sideways glances. Chill, Bjorn. You tell the panic squirming in your ribs. It's just PTSD from that Bergen camping trip. Mud slurps at your heels. An eager pet following its meal. Your pocket warms, the whelk shell from yesterday pulses like a futures trader's pager. Fishermen whisper that spirals trap wayward souls. You slide the shell deeper, just in case. The lullaby dies mid-verse, your throat seizing like a rusted lock. Ahead, a boulder tilts on the marshes, edge too symmetrical. Closer inspection reveals a chiseled face, nose worn to a nub, eyes swallowed by lichen. Historians still argue whether these marsh guardians marked boundaries or dinner reservations for trolls. Your flashlight beam jitters, exposing moss-caked stones in military formation. A shiver, unrelated to cold, climbs your spine. Vikings used standing stones as navigation aids, like a medaddled GPS. You trace a groove in the rock follows the Big Dipper's tail. Tonight, it points southeast toward your shack's moth-eaten sofa. Priorities. Saltwater numbs your fingertips, red and raw from sieve work. You plunge them into a peat pool regret instantly. Feels like liquid nitrogen with better PR. Pulling free, you spot a coin-sized depression in the mud, perfect circle, centered by a single mussel shell. Ritual offering. Kids playing Nordic knots and crosses. The salt marsh keeps its secrets. Clouds clot the moon, darkness falls like a stage curtain. You fumble for your flashlight, click it twice, before remembering the batteries died during Tuesday's moth census. A guttural croak erupts your own voice, muttering, "Bra navigarat, idiot." Lightning stabs the horizon, 3 pulses of green aurora. Shadows leap now the rocks, wear horned helmets. Now the fjord churns with oar splashes. Now your pulse thrums faster than a blacksmith's hammer. You retreat, marsh water sloshing in your boots, like kidnapped fjord. The whelk shell burns against your thigh. Should stayed sieving salt, should have ignored shadows, should have a seal barks, sudden and sandpaper rough. You jump, then wheeze laugh, hand clutching your jackhammering heart. Yeah, laugh it up, flipper. It blinks, oil slick eyes dives without ripples. Back on shale, you collapse, ass meeting cold stone. The lullaby resurfaces, shaky but intact. Sov Godt Pact, each note hangs visible, a curl of breath ghost in the void. Dawn's first bruise-colored light seeps eastward. Your clothes reek of sulfur and cowardice. Those submerged longboats, if they existed at all, have sunk back into myth. You pocket a pebble, your personal "I survived" trophy. Mist rises thick as porridge. Through its veil, a shape materializes, a stooped figure raking salt. You freeze, then recognize your own shadow, warped by fatigue and fog. Relief tastes like aspirin dissolving on your tongue. The path home glimmers, wet shale, mimicking a galaxy. Each salt-crusted step crunches, a Morse code message for future archaeologists. Human passed here, they'll deduce, carrying dubious choices and a damp backside. Wind pirouettes, brings the distant clang of a buoy bell, or a ship's bell, or your eardrums trolling you. You hum louder, let the lullaby smother the marshes' whispers. By the time your shack appears, a slumped silhouette against salmon pink sky. The cold has gnawed through your layers. You glance back once, the fjord smooth as a liar's smile. Fumble with the lock, wooden door groaning its disapproval. Inside, you pour brackish tea into a chipped mug spill some. The puddle forms a lopsided rune, alges maybe. Protection. You snort, click the stove burner alive. Flames hiss, drowning the last shivers from your bones. The burner's flame gutters, its blue tongue lapping at the kettle's sooty belly. You dump the day's brine harvest inside, watch murky water churn like a drunkard's stomach. Vikings used fermented fish, sauce as currency, traded jars of rotten herring goo for Irish wool and Arab glass. Compared to that, salt's practically a futures commodity. Steam rises, condenses on the ceiling planks. Droplets plink into a waiting bucket, nature's metronome. Some swear these first drips contain salt spite, bitterness that'll curdle bread. You flick a spoonful out the window. Let the gulls stomach test it. An hour passes. The air thickens, grit clings to your molars. Your textbook pyramid of peat bricks shrinks, each block sacrificed to the hissing iron beast. 17th century Dutch traders called this Sweetwater, sweat water, though their slaves did the actual sweating. You wipe your brow. Plus saw change. The kettle groans, a basso profundo complaint. Gear-shaped salt crystals bloom on its sides, delicate as lace. One breaks free, tumbles down the metal curve. You imagine it screaming in microscopic terror before dissolving. Humor helps. So does the leftover cloudberry moonshine in your flask. Condensation paints the walls, streaks intersecting at odd angles. History majors would sketch them into runes. Pragmatists see accidental art. You trace a squiggle, it mirrors yesterday's boot print in the marsh. Coincidence or proof salt extraction rots the brain. Debate continues. Jars gleam on the shelf, each labeled with storms and old heartbreaks. Hacken's folly glitters palest pink pollution from a Bergen factory fire. The silent year holds snowflake patterns, brine skimmed during the coldest winter in 80. Conservationists beg you to stop. Customers pay triple for tragedy. The shack door bangs open, Arctic air slams into the steam. Fog swirls into phantom shapes, a horse, a longship sail, your ex waving from a train platform. You cough, dispelling the vision with reality's sledgehammer. Flames dim. Time to stir. The paddle's handle blisters your palm, veteran calluses protesting this encore. Brine swirls counterclockwise, hypnotic as a snake charmer's basket. 17th century Puritans banned salt rings in teacups, called them witches' vortexes. You peer closer. A skin forms, crystalline crust crinkling like ancient parchment. Your sieve hovers, trembling. Too early and you get sludge. Too late and it carbonizes. Your nose knows the sweet spot. Burnt sugar meets ozone, an ancestral skill. Or maybe just ADHD hyperfocus. Silver granules collect in the mesh tiny planets orbiting the sieve's center. One misfires lands on your wrist, a tongue-tip taste test, sharp, clean, with a whisper of pine resin. Success. The stove approves, lurid orange glow fading to contented embers. You shovel salt into jars, each scoop a dry whisper. Last winter's experiment floats, to mind trying to dye crystals with beet juice. Turned the batch puce, labeled it kinky lobster, and sold it to a Malmer drag troupe. Twilight leaks through salt-caked windows, stains the workbench amber. Your shadow mocks you on the wall tall, and spindly as a starving god. What, you mutter? It mimics your jaw clench. Petty bastard. Wind-borne sand peppers the shack, the coast's nightly exfoliation ritual. Stinging grains find your collar, your ears, the corner of your left eye. Blinking back tears, you curse in Bokmal and Sami. The stove creaks, a phlegmy chuckle, jars sealed. You slump onto a stool, its legs. Uneven FROM, Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. Melting a plastic ruler into the wood wasn't your brightest move. The shelf clock ticks, its hands frozen at 2:17 since Thursday's battery surrender. Time becomes fluid here, measured in kettle rotations and peat consumption. Moonlight slithers under the door. Your fingertips drum an old pop ballad on the cooling stove, rhythm syncing with distant waves. Scientists say the Norwegian current carries ice from Greenland's glaciers, each flow a refugee. You wonder if salt travels too, hitchhiking on krill guts. A jar glints, Erica's wrath, glows bluish under the aurora's spill. The '98 hurricane that flattened 3 piers and spawned a dozen sea shanties. You unscrew the lid, inhale metallic air trapped for decades. Did she, Erica, taste this briny tang while clutching a splitting mast? Or is that romantic crap peddled by Oslo novelists? Historians still argue whether storm-named salts hold any real power. Tourists lap it up. You keep a vial of Thor's sneeze in your first aid kit, just in case. Fatigue arrives, a lead tide washing over your limbs. The stove exhales its last warm breath. Outside, frost sketches fractal ferns across the window. You press a palm to the glass, watch the ice melt into tear tracks. Bed beckons, a sagging cot layered with sealskins. Before surrendering, you crack the door. The marsh sleeps beneath its sulfur quilt. No phantom ships, no chainmail clatter, just the fjord's adenoidal snore. As the shack cools, salt contracts, a chorus of crystalline pops. The sound follows you into dreams, where Viking brewers argue over brine to ale ratios. You cast the deciding vote. All mead must taste like Fanta. Democracy works. Dawn will come. The harvest waits. For now, the kettle sleeps, and you with it. You kneel where tide and timber meet boots, sinking into kelp-thick sludge. Driftwood litters the shore bones of nameless ships. Norway's old Norse boats used wood like this, their hulls tarred black with horsehair and cod oil. Your pile grows, gnarled planks bleached salt white, logs pocked with shipworm labyrinths. Each piece sings when split, a different pitch depending on its age. A cedar chunk hums middle sea oak, barks a sharp F sharp. Sami herders once burned driftwood in childbirth fires, claimed bass notes meant boys, treble meant girls. You balance a splintered mast fragment on your knee. What gender is E-flat? Twilight softens the wood's scars, hides the barnacles, razor edges. Your gloves split at the seams of pinky, peeking through like a shy grub. Historians still argue whether those Viking-era carvings on Baltic driftwood were maps or just bored sailors' doodles. You find a plank etched with overlapping circles. Looks like a teenager's math homework. Salt seasons every fiber. The timber crackles differently when burned. Dry kelp serves as kindling. It sparks green like welding arcs. 17th century glassmakers paid extra for this stuff, said Algiash, gave their windows a sea haze glow. You strike a match. The flame leaps up, hungry for cellulose and old ghosts. Smoke spirals, thick coils braiding with the wind. It smells of drowned pine and centuries. 4 charred posts mark last winter's bonfire, now sprouting ivy like feather boas. Your fire pit resembles a half-rotten tooth. Dentists would flinch. Flames gnaw the driest log. Its bark curls into charcoal fists. Heat warms your shins through wool layers. A resin pocket explodes, showering sparks that die in the sand. You mutter a curse, the fire answers with a conversational crackle. Night seeps in indigo, bleeding through the fjord's reflection. Stars speckle the water, Ursa Major dunked headfirst. Fishermen whisper that driftwood fires attract seal people. One logs his sighting in a Best Buy receipt stuffed in a jam jar. You lob another plank into the flames. Only moths come. Embers glow like garnets, each pulse mirroring your tired heartbeat. The woodpile shrinks. Its collapse sends up a firefly swarm of sparks. Beach mice flee the light, tiny shadows sprinting for rock cover. Their eyes gleam, judging your pyromania. Ash settles on your sleeves, gray snow from a silent storm. You scoop a handful sifted through trembling fingers. 18th century soap makers prized this stuff, alkaline enough to strip whale blubber into suds. Your skin itches at the thought. The fjord exhales. A wave licks the fire pit's edge. Steam hisses salt and freshwater arguing thermodynamics. You toast a rock-hard waffle from breakfast, hold it over coals until it softens. The first bite tastes of campfire and surrender. Wind shifts, smoke blinds you mid-chew. Tears carve clean trails through your salt-crusted face. A seagull laughs from the darkness, raucous and unkind. You flick a burnt crust toward the sound. It goes unanswered. Moonlight pales the flames, their warmth, now more memory than fact. You stack the last logs, teepee style, watch them blacken like match heads. Driftwood burns fastest after midnight, or maybe patience frays with the cold. Ice forms in your water bottle, slush that cracks between molars. A seal barks offshore once, twice. You hum a response. It doesn't reciprocate. Typical Fire shrinks to a ruby fist, clenching against the dark. Your shadow stretches inland, reaching for the salt shack's crooked silhouette. The woodpile's gone. Tomorrow's tide will bring reinforcements. You rise, knees popping like bubble wrap, and burlight dies as you kick sand over its corpse. The night accepts this divorce without protest. Ash drifts, settles, sleeps. You trudge uphill, guided by the shack's lone window, a jaundiced eye winking through frost. Behind you, the fjord swallows the stars, one glittering sip at a time. The lantern gutters as you enter, its flame shrinking from the draft. Grandfather's voice surfaces in the rattling hinges. Beware the thieves. Tide swept 16 men to their ledger books in 1910. You click the kettle onto the peat stove, a practiced defiance of memory. Outside, the wind imitates his wheeze, a gale tuning its orchestra. Rain needles the roof, staccato Morse code from the storm. Your thumb traces the lantern's dented base, the same one Grandpa hung during the 63 floods. Fishermen swear drowned souls hitchhike on north winds, their whispers, oil slick and brine horse. You adjust the wick. The flame stretches, casting his shadow against salt-caked shelves. His favorite story spirals unbidden, the harvest of 47 devoured by a single wave. Cliffs crumbled like stale bread, salt pans dissolved into the fjord. 20 tons lost, a year's labor drowned in 7 minutes. Historians still argue whether medieval turf roofs worsened the floods or just gave villagers something to blame. You sip lukewarm chicory, pretending it's his licorice root brew. The storm crescendos, window panes bowing like ship sails. A plank moans underfoot, echoing the Marian's hull before she split apart in Oslo fjord. Grandpa insisted broken ships haunt their own wreckage, wood groaning in the exact key of its demise. You hum a D minor chord. The house holds its breath. Your notebook lies open, flood formulas half scribbled between grocery lists. Wave force equals mass, regret. Grandpa's equation. He never finished 8th grade, but could predict storms by the ache in his missing toe. Frostbite, 55. Rain slips under the door, liquid shadows spreading across planks. You drop a towel, watch it bloom into a Rorschach squid. 12 generations of your family fought this shore. Someone, most just, stopped. The ledger in the cupboard lists names, black ink bleeding into mildew. The lantern dims, kerosene sloshes, a 1/4 inch of false optimism. You unscrew the reservoir spill, a droplet on your wrist. It sits there, a quivering pupil. 17th century alchemists believed storm rain mixed with lamp oil could reveal ghosts. You wait. The bead evaporates. Nothing manifests but your reflection in the glass. Wind yanks the weather vane, its rooster screeching against rust. Grandma called that sound the hen's lament. She'd spin yarn during gales, claiming tempests tightened the wool. Her mittens always smelled of wet sheep and defiance. A branch scrapes the window, claw taps timed to your pulse. You flick the curtain. Just spruce fingers, no skeletal crews or brine-bleached faces. Local teens dare each other to touch Shipwreck Burnt's cottage at midnight. They never mention the seaweed stench clinging to their jackets afterward. The kettle shrieks, a sound Grandpa called T's battle cry. You douse leaves, watching them swirl like sediment in storm surge. 3 sugars, his recipe for surviving memories. Heat scalds your tongue, rebirths his voice. Listen close. Iajo bad weather's just the world breathing. Thunder cracks, a sheet metal roar. The lantern dies. Darkness swallows the room, then retreats as lightning etches the scene. Jarred salt glows blue, temporary constellations. You count between flashes, 1, 2, 7 seconds before the next strike. Grandpa said thunder waiting taught him patience. You say it taught him bad pacing. Rain drums the chimney, ash swirling inside like panic. You wedge a boot against the stove, feel its fever through the soul. 19 fishermen perished in the 1625 Skagerrak disaster, trapped when their own nets anchored them under waves. Their widows' lanterns still dot coastal attics unlit. A draft lifts the ledger's pages, fluttering like gulls over chum. October 12th, 1998, your first solo harvest. Grandpa's handwriting caught her talking to the brine shrimp, future spinster. Heat creeps up your neck. You snap the book shut. Something clatters downstairs, tools surrendering to the wind. Your flashlight reveals only rakes prone on the cellar steps, but the air smells suddenly of pipe tobacco, a trick of damp synapses. The storm falters, replaced by hail's a rhythmic tap. Ice pellets ricochet off the stovepipe miniature cannonades. You catch one midair, its cold sting lasting longer than the warmth in your palm. Silence seeps in the eye of the thing. Even the salt mice pause their scratching. Grandpa's voice again, softer now. Never trust a quiet storm, Genta. The walls exhale creaks, settling into their 90-year slump. Hail resumes angrier. You retreat to the cot, dragging quilts flavored with peat and mothballs. The ledger digs into your ribs. You chuck it under the bed, watch cobwebs shiver. 5 spiders evacuate, diplomats fleeing a coup. Sleep comes in stamps, a feral cat you can't domesticate. Dreams splice Grandpa's stories with college meteorology lectures. Professor Lund's pointer lands on a cloud map. It morphs into your mother's funeral program. Dawn leaks through cracks, weak tea spilling across the floorboards. The storms moved east, chewing on Sweden now. You check the tide clock, 3 hours, till the sea remembers its manners. Grandpa's lantern sits cold, its glass smudged with yesterday's breath. You pocket a matchbox, step into air, scraped raw by the gale. The shore lies rearranged, driftwood heaped into new graves. Somewhere beneath, the Marion's timbers sing, a low B-flat only storms can hear. Moonlight bleeds through salt-encrusted windows, pooling around jars that crowd crooked shelves. You drag a finger through the dust, writing your initials in a crust that tastes of iron and vanished tempests. Norway's coastal harvesters once traded salt cod, to Hanseatic merchants for Prussian barley, a fact you learned from Grandpa's moldering almanac. The largest jar glows like a captive iceberg, its label frayed at the edges. Erica's Wrath, 93. You twist the cork, a hiss of trapped August humidity escapes. 17 summers back, that storm peeled roofs off barns and left herring shining in treetops. Historians still argue whether farmwives really used storm salt to curse unfaithful husbands, or if that's just tavern gossip fossilized into legend. 3 squat jars nest in driftwood cradles, their glass-kissed blue by cobalt oxide. Winter's silent year, no storms, just 6 months of breathless cold. Inside, flakes shaped like fern leaves. Viking midwives allegedly slipped such salt into birthing broth to steal the child's spine. You snort, but pocket a pinch anyway. Your boot nudges a crate, glass chimes as bottles shift. A label flutters down Galemaker's tithe, 1,821. Grandpa swore this batch came from a hurricane that birthed Tromso's tidal krakens. Pure myth. You mutter, yet the jar's surface feels unnervingly warm. Shelves sag under decades of accumulation, preserved blizzards, archived squalls. One jar's contents resemble volcanic ash, the Black Week, 1944. Occupation patrols missed this cove, letting harvesters boil resistance messages into salt. Dissolve a teaspoon in water, they said, and spectral ink appears. You never tested it. A shattered jar leaks silver grains across the floor, victim of last night's gale. Its label survives, the maiden's grudge. Grandma's looping script tells of a bride, drowned en route to her wedding. Fishermen still leave salt packets on the fjord's eastern shoals to appease her ghost's thirst for spices. You crouch, sifting spillage through your fingers. 10th century traders allegedly carried salt amulets to repel marsh wraiths. The granules trickle back into a chipped teacup, its handle mended with barnacle glue. 7 pebbles line the rim, a childhood habit to track midnight tides. Wind sneaks under the cellar door, fluttering an oilskin ledger open. Pages list storms in cramped Norwegian, Skomvær tragedy. Shelves lost 20 jars, shattered, paid Anderson 3 krona for repairs. A pressed flower stains November 1962, rose hips from Grandma's funeral wreath. Your thumbnail skims a jar's embossed date, 1749, the Great Salinity Crisis, when Baltic currents shifted, rotting Danish salt vaults. Experts think it caused a herring glut, but your tongue remembers the brine's strange sweetness that decade. Copper sieves left metallic aftertastes for 40 harvests. A cobwebbed corner hides a flask stoppered with seal leather. Storm's milk, warning, fjord sulfur. 19th century crews drank this during whiteouts, each sip a candle flame in the belly. You uncork it, recoil at the stench of burnt hair and ozone. Damp warps the lowest shelf, jars lean like drunken sailors. You catch a harvest of shadows, 1917, before it plunges. The glass sweats in your grip, leaving salt dove silhouettes on your palm. Icelanders claim such marks reveal how you'll die. Yours looks suspiciously like a falling anvil. Moonlight shifts, illuminating a crate under coal sacks. Inside, tiny bottles corked with whalebone. Eclipse brine 1825. Legends say fishermen painted this on their eyes to see auroras in daylight. You dab a speck on your wrist, the skin tingles, but the window shows only stars. Ants march through a crack, their trail bypassing every jar. Wise bugs. Grandpa told you salt cellars drive pests, mad make them gnaw their own legs off. You sprinkle a barrier, 50 grains for the 50 spiders you evicted last week. The clock doorbell echoes through floorboards, 3 a.m., vibrations tingling bare feet. You grab a jar at random, the Laughing Gale, 2004. Its crystals spark even in gloom. That storm tore through your 8th grade summer stole. The dock left Grandma's rocking chair on a neighbor's roof. Ink stains your thumbnail blue from tracing labels. You suck it clean, taste bitter oak and regret. Wives used to rub salt in sailors' wounds, not to heal, but to test if they'd flinch from pain's promise. A splintered board creaks overhead. Rats, wind, doesn't matter. You're rooting under the stairs now, knees printing moons in the dust. A leather pouch spills salt dyed red with madder root. Executioners allegedly scattered this on treasonous corpses, though Oslo's archives insist it's just fish-curring residue. Your shadow stretches across jars, a giantess harvesting phantom storms. One label winks, Iajo's Folly, your childhood nickname. The jars, half-empty stolen pinches, flavoring a decade of failed soups. A pressed maple leaf floats inside, crumbling at the edges. 3 floorboards whine as you stand, cellar's ancient complaint. The Marion's bell tolls underwater, or maybe it's blood drumming in your ears. You ascend, salt grit crunching under heels, and lock the cellar on a sigh. Dawn's first blush seeps through clouds. A single jar warms your grip, winter's silent year. Someone should taste that fabled steel spine salt. The kettle's already singing. The kettle's whistle fades as steam uncurls, a ghostly finger tracing your cheek. You set the jar beside a chipped mug, winter's silent year's label, catching lamplight. Birch root simmers its bark, scraped from trees Vikings once blamed for souring milk. Historians know medieval Norwegians brewed it to outwit scurvy. But you're just here for the caffeine. Your glasses fog, free spa treatment courtesy of the Arctic. 3 pinches of fernflake salt dissolve into the tea, each grain hissing like a tiny deflating balloon. The first sip punches your tongue bitter earth and a metallic afterbite. Steel spine broth. You mock, voice hoarse from days of disuse. Grandma swore this brew cured her brother's moral rot, though he still wound up selling counterfeit reindeer licenses. A seal barks in the bay its gruff RR, unanswered by gulls. Shorebirds fled south last week, sensible creatures. You cradle the mug, heat bleeding through gloves, mended with fishing line. 19th century harvesters used salt blocks as currency. Here paid midwives with palm-sized slabs. One journal claimed a man bought his wife's dowry in storm-quality crystals, then tried to return her when the brine clumped. The second sip gentler, or maybe your taste buds surrendered. Salt prickles your upper lip, a sensation Icelandic poets called kiss of the drowned. Shadows sway where dried cod hangs from rafters, their hollow eyes judging your posture. You slump lower. Wind bullies the shack, rattling jars of cloudberry jam on the sill. Blue glass blurs as condensation drips, fake tears for no audience. A driftwood clock ticks, its hands bent at jaunty angles since the 92 squall. Historians still argue whether Viking longships navigated these fjords by starlight or just followed the stench of fermenting shark. A pewter spoon clatters, your pinky accidentally resurrecting childhood piano lessons. Chopsticks never sounded so ominous. Outside, waves smack rocks with wet applause, or maybe they're booing. You swipe steam off your lenses. The world sharpens into frostbitten focus. The tea's dregs swirl, black grit clinging like lake bottom silt. Your tongue detects a whisper of burnt caramel ore. Is that wishful thinking? A faded postcard taped to the wall taunts greetings from Bergen. Sent by your sister 5 years back. She's a dentist now, drills molars under clinical lights, while you lick salt off knives. 3 knuckles crack as you stretch, your spine replicating a ship's rigging during a gale. The rules of shoreline solitude float into mind. Never whistle after dusk. Always pour the first coffee for the waves. Pretend you don't miss asphalt. Moonlight sifts through cracked mortar, dust motes, performing a lazy waltz. You trace a whorl in the pine table, carved by some predecessor's restless knife. 8th century law codes required salt in divorce settlements. Here, 1 pound per year of marriage. Your laugh surprises you, a seal's bark of its own. The mug cools its final sip, sludgy, with undissolved salt. You debate licking the rim, decide against it. Spoons were invented for dignity. A drip slides down the jar's neck, catching moonlight like a liquid pearl. Tide charts rustle, their pinned corners flapping like captive moths. You should refill the stove. You don't. 3 ice chunks shift in the water bucket, squeaking like unoiled hinges. Grandpa claimed frozen seawater held fragments of sailors' final words if you thaws it against your chest. The seal calls again, closer now. Maybe it's offering critique on your tea making. Birch root numbs your gums, a dental disaster in the making. You'll floss with fishing line later, rough redemption for reckless hygge. Pale streaks bruise the eastern sky, dawn elbowing night aside. Your shadow stretches across the wall, a marionette with salt-stiffened strings. That Finnish documentary crew offered to film here last summer, until they realized your shower was a bucket. Lamplight gilds the empty mug, its cracks webbed like ancient pottery. Breakfast looms, Another thrilling round of rye bread and self-reflection. You flick a salt crystal into the sink. It chimes against enamel. The whelk gleams wet in your palm, its spiral ridges mirroring the creases of your lifeline. You found it wedged in tidal muck, perfect despite centuries of wave churn. 19th century beachcombers called these tide stitchers, believed they mended frayed destinies at low tide. Fishermen still slip them into christening cribs, though Sophia from the bait shop insists they're just sea snail condos. Cold seeps through your knee pad seams as you crouch, salt crusting your bootlaces into makeshift shackles. The shell's apex feels sharp, a tiny spire threatening to draw blood. Viking traders carried similar whelks as currency, weight-for-weight swaps with Arab merchants hungry for ivory. Experts think 16 spirals bought a Damascus steel knife, or 3 moderately obedient huskies. You rotate the shell, its grooves catch the half-light like braille. Local lore claims counting ridges predicts storm surges. Odd numbers mean sleet, even promises snow. Last winter's almanac swore by it right before a hailstorm shredded 3 trawler sails. Your pinky traces the whorls, 1, 2, 3, a shiver sprouting at your nape. Sand grinds underfoot damp and granular as brown sugar. A receding wave leaves a foam mustache on the shoals. Historians still argue whether Norse settlers used whelk patterns to navigate fjords, or just liked how they looked on belt buckles. You pocket the shell, its weight familiar as a subway token. Wind snakes through your scarf, carrying the briny tang of a fish market's closing hour. Your thumb finds the shell's aperture smooth as a porcelain spoon. In the 1930s, a Parisian perfumer tried distilling essence of whelk bankrupt within months. Rumor says her lab smelled like a teenager's gym bag. A tern dive bombs the shallows, emerges empty-beaked. You imagine the whelk's original occupant, soft body retreating deeper into its calcium coil. Modern pagans pickle such shells in moonwater for aura scrubs. You'd rather risk tan lines. The tide nips at your boots' time to retreat. You climb slippery rocks, their surfaces pocked with limpets clinging like suction cup toys. A barnacle scrapes your palm, rewarding you with a bead of blood. Salt seals the wound instantly, nature's gritty band-aid. Back in the shack, you set the whelk beside salt cellar jars, its spiral defying the straight lines of labels and ledgers. Night drapes the window, a theater curtain closing on the shore's matinee. Your lantern gutters, flames starving for cheap kerosene. The shell hums when you tap it, a faint ping like a wineglass's edge. Grandma called that mermaid telegraph, claimed you could eavesdrop on their gossip with your ear pressed close. You try it, hearing only your own pulse, and a distant ice flows groan. Moonlight bleaches the floorboards, your shadow merges with the whelk's coiled silhouette. 6th century sagas warn against gifting spiral shells, said to knot the recipient's fate. Too late now. It's yours, a calcified comma in the Shorelines' endless sentence. Your finger traces the ridges again, 27 in total. Divided by 3 carry, the one equals 9 waves before dawn. Math was never your strong suit. The whelk doesn't judge. It survived worse errors. Tea kettle steam swirls in a parallel spiral, briefly mirroring your stolen treasure. You drizzle salt into the brew, a pointless ceremony. The shell watches patient as sedimentary rock somewhere offshore. Its siblings roll in the undertow, riddling the dark with their silent arithmetic. Dawn cracks the horizon like an eggshell, pale light spilling over frozen marsh grass. Each blade wears a glassy sheath, shattered chandeliers melted into frost. You exhale a ghostly bloom that lingers, then fades, as if embarrassed by its own audacity. 19th century ice harvesters would, salivated at this sight, Norwegian crystal, shipped to London's cocktail bars in sawdust packs. Your boots crunch through the crust, a sound like biting into caramelized sugar. A birch branch droops its icy casing stiff as blown glass. You snap off a twig. It fractures cleanly, no sap left to protest. Viking sagas mention frost nails, piercing corpses' lips. Superstition says it stopped the dead from spilling secrets. Your chapped lips stay mercifully pin-free, though the cold prickles like acupuncture gone feral. The salt cellar's roof glistens, icicles daggering from its eaves. You duck beneath them, thinking of 19th century Oslo chefs who sprinkled glacial shavings into champagne. One bankrupt baron reportedly served diamond slush at his daughter's wedding. Guests later sued over chipped teeth. Your own teeth chatter nature's maracas applauding the sunrise. Frost feathers spiral across a granite boulder delicate as lace collars. You press a mittened hand against the stone. The pattern transfers in reverse, a fleeting tattoo. Some claim such imprints map underground springs, though you've yet to find evidence beyond soggy socks. Historians still argue whether Arctic explorers used frost patterns to navigate, or just hallucinated from scurvy. A ptarmigan waddles past, its winter plumage dusted with icy sequins. It pecks at a frozen berry, the sound echoing like a typewriter key. Your stomach growls, an unpaid intern demanding breakfast. You mentally list rations, oatmeal, cloudberry jam, that suspiciously fuzzy rye bread. The ptarmigan eyes you avian judgment, radiating through its beady stare. Sunlight hits the marsh, frost ignites into prisms. You shield your eyes, the world reduced to fractured rainbows. 18th century scientists called this the diamond sickness, believed concentrated sparkles could blind reindeer herders. Modern cameras capture it as Instagram confetti, minus the ocular trauma. Your thermos creaks open, steam erupts like a geyser's yawn. Tea sloshes over the rim, instantly freezing into an amber pendant. You lick it off, regretting the impulse as your tongue sticks to metal. Pro tip: never sample cryogenic jewelry without mittens. The kettle's leftover salt water has crystallized overnight, a miniature Antarctica in your chipped enamel pot. You chip at the crust. Flakes scatter like crushed aspirin. Fishermen once used such salt to preserve cod tongues, considered a delicacy if you ignore the texture of wet cardboard. Wind sculpts new frost dunes across the shoreline, erasing your boot prints from existence. You feel oddly jealous, if only regrets faded that cleanly. The whelk in your pocket feels heavier, its spiral now sugared with ice granules. You consider leaving it as an offering, but sentimentality glues it to your palm. A pine tree's shadow stretches toward you, elongated fingers clawing at your scarf. Norse myths warned of frost giants, reshaping forests into skeletal armies. This one seems content to just photobomb your solitude. No armor, no battle cries. Your nose drips. The droplet freezes midair before hitting a fern. It hangs there, a minuscule disco ball, refracting 10,000 dawns. You resist the urge to flick it. Some artworks demand reverence, even if they're just snot-based. Ice whispers as it melts the marsh, exhaling in wet gasps. Your knees protest as you stand, joints creaking like an unoiled pump organ. Cold has seeped into everything. Even your thoughts move sluggishly, honey-dipped and numb. The ptarmigan returns, now trailing 2 chicks dusted in snowflake camouflage. They peck at your abandoned tea pendant, tiny beaks clinking against frozen sugar. You name them hail, sleet, and unnecessary commentary, though they decline to introduce themselves. By mid-morning, the frost surrenders, reduced to sad puddles weeping into moss. Your cathedral crumbles, glass walls melting into the mud. Only the icicles remain, dripping a Morse code elegy onto the salt-rimed soil. You catch a droplet on your tongue. It tastes of fleetingness and yesterday's chamomile tea. The whelk warms in your grip, its spiral shed of frosty armor. You press it against your cheek, a cold kiss from a ghost season. Summer will bleach these marshes dry but for now. Winter lingers in the curve of a shell, and the stubborn ice clinging to your cuffs like shattered constellations. The forgotten path reveals itself at noon, a threadbare ribbon weaving through boulders fuzzy with wolf lichen. Your map's crisp ink ends. Here yet the stones hum when your boot scrapes their surfaces. A sound like a refrigerator vibrating behind drywall. 16th century traders supposedly navigated these trails to avoid Danish tax collectors, though modern hikers just follow GPS dots. You press a palm to the nearest rock. The hum thrums through your mittens, buzzing molars and funny bone alike. Moss paints the granite in oxidized greens and mustard yellows, nature's camouflage for misplaced Lego bricks. Each step dislodges crumbs of rust-colored lichen. They float downward, arrested midair by spiderwebs sagging with frost. You recall a Reykjavik conspiracy theorist claiming such stones store Viking-era lullabies. Patent nonsense unless tinnitus counts as folk music. The boulders tighten around you, shoulders grazing their icy biofilm. Historians still argue whether these pinch points deterred wolves or funneled reindeer toward waiting spears. A rock wedged overhead drips meltwater. Each drop hits your collar, migrating down your spine like a paranoid centipede. Pro tip: never let geology give you a wet willy. Sunlight filters through a keyhole gap ahead, beckoning like a cheat code in a video game. Your instincts itch, that primal GPS wired into human cerebellums. Camel traders had stars. You've got mismatched serotonin and a half-charged phone. The map rustles in your pocket, its silence suddenly judgmental. You freeze mid-stride, the hum crescendos. A lichen-crusted monolith blocks the way, its surface pocked with fist-sized indentations. Runologists would hyperventilate over these cup marks, though you're more concerned with the black beetle staring from one hollow. It waves its antennae, a tiny traffic cop denying passage. Wind shivers through a fissure. The stones answer with a chord of dissonant notes. 19th century physicists hypothesized that iron veins caused the hum until someone licked a rock and tasted 0 batteries. The beetle retreats, its disapproval evident in the twitch of its elytra. You squeeze past the monolith, parka zipper screeching like a tortured violin. The path widens, revealing a crescent of flat stones arranged like rotten teeth. One slab tilts upward, exposing roots tangled around a rusted axe head. Your pulse stutters, imagination conjuring bloodstains and timber screams. Reality check: it's likely a lost tool from some sheep farmer's panic attack. You kneel, fingertips brushing the axe's pitted surface. Cold bleeds through your gloves, a greasy chill that lingers like a bad handshake. 8th century Norse law required farmers to maintain communal trails, a fact that comforts you exactly 0%. The axe remains mum, its secrets swallowed by peat and indifference. A lichen stripe on your knee matches the boulders. You've become briefly fashionable, encrypted camo. The stone's hum dips lower now, a subwoofer drone vibrating your socks. Modern hikers report migraines here, or is that just dehydration and Wi-Fi withdrawal? The path coils upward, granite giving way to shale that flakes like stale croissants. Your boot dislodges a plate-sized fragment. It skitters downslope, waking echoes in the gully below. You wait for the sound of impact. It never comes. Either the cliff is bottomless, or your ears have surrendered to the cold. A cairn materializes ahead, stones stacked with the precision of a drunk bricklayer. You add a pebble, your contribution to this ongoing rock landfill. Alpine tradition says cairns guide lost souls, though Instagrammers mainly use them to stunt for influencers. The hum fades as you crest the ridge, replaced by wind razoring through your nostrils. Below sprawls a valley veined with half-frozen streams, their waters black as squid ink. Your thighs tremble, quads filing a formal complaint about the incline. One stream bends unnaturally, a right angle that defies erosion's slapdash artistry. Dutch engineers taught Norwegians canal digging in the 1600s, but this looks older. Your mind loops footage of druids with protractors, mockumentary material, yet weirdly persuasive. A flat stone spans the stream, its surface carved with concentric circles. You test it with a toe. The slab groans, but holds. Crossing feels like trespassing. Some borders aren't on maps. The water's reflection shows your face blurred, edges smudged like a charcoal sketch. Something glints in the shallows, a coin-sized button embossed with a crowned lion. Swedish military uniforms had those during the 7 Years' War, or maybe it's a prop from a Malmö theater. You let the current claim it. History deserves its privacy, sometimes. The far bank slopes into a birch grove, trunks twisted into arthritic poses. Bark peels away in scrolls, each curl stamped with beetle calligraphy. A branch snaps behind you, too loud for wind, too crisp for wildlife. You turn nothing but the stream's coiled grin and the axe-studded slope. Your neck hairs vote unanimously to leave. Shadows stretch. The sun dips behind the ridge, stealing the valley's greens and golds. You click your flashlight, its beam quivers, cowed by the landscape's indifference. The path continues into the grove, a tunnel of clawing twigs and witch-fingered limbs. You step forward. The birch grove closes around you, twigs clawing at your sleeves like petulant children. Your stomach growls, a feral sound that startles a jay from its perch. Lunchtime whispers through your chilled bones, a reminder that even salt harvesters need carbs. You shrug off your pack. Its contents clatter like a poorly organized kitchen drawer. Out comes the rye loaf, blackened crust crackling under your grip. Kelpash gives it that gravelly charm and probably counts as a serving of vegetables. The bread crunches like stepped-on snow. Your jaw works overtime to domesticate each mouthful. Salted butter melts into the fissures, transforming crumbs into sudden bursts of wet gold. 8th century Norse laws find households for skimpy butter portions, a fact that comforts you as you glob on another pat. A whelk shell serves as your plate, its ridges cradle crumbs like miniature ski jumps. You lick butter from your thumb, hygiene be damned, and survey the grove. Shadows pool between birches, but no axe-wielding specters emerge. Small mercies, your thermos gurgles, birchroot tea steam fogs your glasses. The brew bites with tannic confidence, a Viking's breakfast in beverage form. Historians still argue whether kelpash in bread prevented goiters or just made everyone thirsty. You side with team flavor. A beetle trundles across your boot, its shell glinting like oil on pavement. You flick a crumb its way, it freezes, antennae twitching in existential doubt. The Nobel Committee hasn't invented a prize for crumb relations yet, but there's still time. Sunlight slants through peeling bark. The trees shed their papery skins like sunburned tourists. One strip dangles near your ear. You resist the urge to scribble a grocery list on it. 17th century priests used birch bark for secret love notes. True story. The butter knife glints, a sliver of steel with a whalebone handle. Rust freckles its blade, proof that salt air conquers all. You scrape off a lichen flake. Lunch shouldn't include side dishes that photosynthesize. Wind combs through the canopy, birches sway in minimalist unison. Their leaves hiss like radio static, or maybe that's your ears still ringing from the humming stones. You crunch another bite rye and regret in equal measure. A pine marten watches from a branch, its eyes twin drops of crude oil. Tension builds. Will it swipe your lunch or just judge your chewing technique? It sneezes, a dismissal, and melts into the branches. You pocket the whelk shell. Future archaeologists will either puzzle over it or call it art. The thermos hisses as you screw it shut, a sigh of relief from overworked stainless steel. Around you, birch pollen drifts, a yellow haze with delusions of grandeur. Legends claim butter churned under a full moon never spoils, a neat trick for pre-fridge societies. Your own butter sweats in the chill, proving either the tale's fake or your lunar timing sucks. Breadcrumbs dot your lap, a topographical map of this terrible meal. You brush them off, they plummet into moss like suicidal paratroopers. Ants will write ballads about this windfall. The grove exhales, a breeze thick with resin and indecision. You stand knees popping like bubble wrap and shoulder your pack. Somewhere downstream, a copper kettle awaits, and more salt than any reasonable person should handle. A hammering rhythm cuts through the wind, metal kissing metal in a Morse code you've learned by heart. You turn. Old Nils crests the ridge, barrel hoops jangling on his back like a drunken tambourine. His boots chew the gravel. Each step smells of oak tannins and stubbornness. Late spring storms warp the staves. He barks, no hello, as if resuming a conversation you'd forgotten. You'll be needing a new brine cask before the gales. The hoops clatter to the ground. They roll like defiant hula hoops until your boot halts one. He fingers the nearest barrel, its wood swollen into a gap-toothed grin. See here, only 8 ribs left, and one's younger than my first ex-wife. You bite back a smirk. Norse coopers used to bury barrels in marshes to keep them tight. You've seen the peat-stained relics in Bergen's museum. Nils prefers nails and lectures. He wedges a replacement stave into place, iron rod screeching against oak. Found a shipwreck barrel off Skalman Island once, still full of herring from the Hanseatic days. Fish were gray as dish rags, smelled like Satan's pantry. You hand him a mallet, he waves it off. Tools are for amateurs. Watch calloused thumbs press the wood. Grain submits to his grip like chastened dough. Barrel hoops slide home. The cask regains its figure. You half expect applause. Instead, Nils flicks a woodlouse from his sleeve. It arcs into the fjord with Olympic grace. His stories unspool as you work, a yarn about smuggling cognac in pickle barrels during Prohibition. Stank up the whole harbor. Feds thought we were exporting sauerkraut. Salt-crusted fingers tug his beard. A few crumbs from last week's dinner snow onto your boots. The repair takes 17 minutes. The tale of his 3 failed marriages takes 42. You learn that that his second wife left him for a bagpipe maker. Never trust a man who works with sheep guts and hot air. An eider duck glides past. Its trajectory mirrors your dwindling patience. He pauses to suck peppermint lozenges, each unwrapping louder than a gunshot. You know why coopers went bald in the old days. Lie from the barrel-curring pits. He nods at your intact scalp, a warning. You resist the urge to touch your hair. Twilight stains his tailies darker, a saga about a 14th century cooper who vanished midshipment. They say his ghost still walks Otta, tries to sell rotted staves to tourists. The new barrel sits plump and silent. You're tempted to crawl inside for refuge. He departs as abruptly as he came, hoops now strapped to a wheelbarrow squeakier than a mouse choir. Oil the bung hole weakly. He hollers over his shoulder. You make a mental note to Google what a bung hole actually is. Historians still argue whether Viking-age barrels held more mead or skeletons. You're just glad yours will hold salt. The shack smells of fresh oak and unwelcome nostalgia. You sweep up wood shavings. They curl like fossilized commas, and wonder who'll mend Nils' barrels when he's gone. Moonlight lacquers the fjord. Your repaired cask glows like a pagan artifact. Somewhere downstream, waves gnaw at the shore patient as a cooper's apprentice. You sip lukewarm tea, its bitterness a familiar comfort, and count the hours till dawn. Morning bleeds through the clouds, a watercolor smear of pearl and smoke. You squint upward. The sky mirrors the eider ducks swooping past, their downy undersides copied by some lazy celestial painter. Their nests dot the skerries ahead, clumps of stolen seaweed piled like unearthed troll treasures. You wade through marsh grass. Each step releases a briny sigh. A female eider eyes you from her nest, her body a feathered boulder. Her chicks vanished weeks ago, eaten or fledged, but she guards the hollow anyway. Defending an empty castle, you murmur. She blinks, a monarch dismissing a jester. Centuries ago, kings demanded Eiderdown as tribute. Vikings stuffed their pillows with stolen fluff. You crouch, pluck a stray feather from the nest's rim. It dissolves between your fingers, softer than silence. Experts think nesting habits shifted when lighthouses stole the best rocky real estate. The ducks adapted, using driftwood tangles as makeshift forts. Your boot nudges a rusted sardine tin, half buried in kelp. Inside, shredded seaweed and down form a crude mattress. Upgraded to a studio apartment, you mutter. Fisher folk whisper that elder ducks trick gulls into nest-sitting avian babysitters bribed with leftover fish scraps. You half expect to find a tiny duck-sized Times Square billboard. Prime ocean, view, sublet available. A nest near the tide line pulses with fluff. Each breeze sends goosebump tufts skittering. You catch one midair. It tickles your palm like a spider's farewell kiss. Oslo's medieval tax ledgers list Eiderdown by the pound payment for fishermen's debts. You imagine some clerk sneezing over parchment, feathers stuck to his wax seal. Historians still argue whether Harold Fairhair slept on Eiderdown or just appreciated its resale value. You pocket a feather, planning to mail it to your cousin in Bergen. It'll disintegrate before reaching the post office, a metaphor you're too tired to decode. Rain threatens. The clouds bruise purple at the edges. You count 17 nests on the skerry, each a messy masterpiece. One perches in a dead raven's cradle of ribs, nature's morbid real estate flip. A shopkeeper in Tromsø once tried selling haunted eiderdown from a similar find, marked up 300%. You spot an empty whiskey bottle wedged into a nest, its label peeled by salt. A gaggle of ducks bob offshore, their gossiping squawks carry across the waves. One dives emerges with a crab claw, the others applaud with synchronized head bobs. You pretend not to envy their simple agendas. Sunlight stutters through the gloom, the bay becomes a mercury puddle. A drake's emerald head streak glints, neon in the murk. Your thermos yields the last swallow of coffee. It's cold and perfect. Somewhere beyond the horizon, an Oslo millionaire sinks into an eiderdown duvet, never guessing their luxury began as duck-plucked pirate loot. The wind shifts, bringing a stench of rotting kelp and diesel. A trawler's silhouette etches itself against the clouds, modernity's paper cut on the fjord. The eider flock scatters, their wings drumming a retreat. You lick salt from your lips, trace the feather's remains in your pocket. It clings to the fabric, ghostly insistence. Drizzle arrives, needling your neck. You turn toward the shack, its roof sagging like a tired punchline. Behind you, waves dismantle the whiskey bottle nest, glass shards glittering like betrayed diamonds. Your thoughts drift to hotel thread counts and stolen smartphones, crimes against humanity, or Darwin awards in waiting. Twilight cottons, the sky, the eider ducks fade into specks. Your boots leave temporary graves in the sand, each filled by the tide's slow slurp. The feather's final strand escapes your pocket, a pale apostrophe lost in the gloaming. You hum a shipping forecast tune, notes dissolving like sugar in tea, and let the damp air braid itself into your lungs. The shack's door groans, its protest muffled by the growl of wind. You fumble for matches, their sulfur stink cut with brine, and coax the stove back to life. Flames gnaw peat chunks, hissing like wet cats. Your notebook lies splayed on the table, pages warped into tidal wave shapes. Oslo glows in your mind, a postcard of street lamps and unread emails. But the pen feels heavier than your copper sieve. Damp paper curls under your palm, each stroke bleeds into woolly Rorschach blots. You start 3 times, ripping sheets into confetti for the draft. Dear Mari becomes dear former self morphs into to whoever's still awake. Historians still argue whether WWII resistance fighters really used lemon juice as invisible ink, or just liked pranking archivists. Your own message stays stubbornly visible, ink pooling where salt grains snag the nib. A draft sneaks under the door, extinguishing your fourth attempt. Outside, waves gnaw the dock, wooden teeth grinding. You recall a museum exhibit on 19th century love letters preserved in jam jars, their sweetness fossilizing desperation. Your words lack that romance. Harvest was okay. Money's tight. Please stop sending tofu recipes dissolves into a doodle of the eider duck queen. The stove devours your failures. Each page blackens and twists. Ash flutters upward, mocking snowflakes. A Norwegian king once wrote 72 drafts of his abdication speech, then died clutching the envelope. You wonder if his ghost haunts trash bins, scowling at crumpled regrets. Your knuckle brushes the salt cellar, its glass cold as a dead lighthouse lens. One jar glows faintly, labeled Erica's wrath, in your shaky cursive. The night she capsized 3 trawlers, you'd sheltered here, writing apology letters to ex-lovers. None were mailed. Fate prefers blunt instruments over pens. Rain drums the roof, Morse code without meaning. You scribble a haiku about diesel-stained seagulls, then burn it mid-syllable. A fringe linguist claims Viking runes were misread, that some stones just catalog fish types. Your own legacy, grocery lists, and half-baked epiphanies swallowed by flame. Wind slaps the window, a disinterested critic. The final envelope sticks to your fingers, Norwegian stamps featuring cheerful puffins. You lick the seal. It tastes of bureaucracy and dead algae. Words congeal at last, 3 lines so anemic they'd blush in a doctor's office. The stove gasps when you open its mouth, a dragon fed on typos. You hesitate, the letter's corner kissing the coals. Some say Kafka's executor ignored his wish to burn everything, a mercy or betrayal. Your own work crisps quickly, edges lifting like forbidden wings. Smoke pirouettes up the chimney, your confessions, now Arctic stratosphere dust. The empty jar of Erica's wrath winks from the shelf. Its contents once salted a diplomat's wedding feast. Your tongue finds a canker sore, stings when you laugh. Outside, the tide belches up someone else's bottle, a green glass shipwreck. You click the pen, its retractable nib mimicking a guillotine. Cold seeps through your socks, the floorboards hoarding winter. A milk crate serves as a chair, its protests familiar as an old argument. The remaining paper mocks you, blank as the fjord under fog. Flame shadows tattoo the walls, dancing black hieroglyphs. You trace one with a charred stick. It resembles your mother's disapproving eyebrow. Oslo fades, a distant tickle in the ear. Your lungs inhale ash and brine, particles of everything unsaid gluing themselves to your ribs. The storm peaks, rattling the salt-stiffened window latch. You pocket the puffin stamps, overpriced talismans against next year's loneliness. Dawn remains hours off, a rumor in whale song. Ink dries on your thumb, a comma-shaped bruise, as the stove exhales your last secret into the gale. Embers die in the stove, their orange pupils shrinking to pinpricks. You shrug off the wool blanket, its itch now more persistent than the cold. Through warped glass, the horizon shimmers green, a neon serpent coiling above ice floes. Northern lights weren't always poetic Norse warriors, thought them Valkyrie armor glinting mid-flight. You count 7 pulsations before the aurora fractures, a shattered disco ball over the fjord. Your boots crunch through shingle snow, each step sinks with the lighthouse's distant blink. Ice encrusts your scarf, each breath stiffens the fabric into a brittle mask. A Soviet sub once got stuck here during the Cold War. Crewmen traded vodka for cod until thaw. Historians still argue whether auroras trigger melancholy or just mirror what's already there. You kick a frozen jellyfish. It skitters like hockey puck gifted by Poseidon. The bay breathes, waves exhale slush against the shore. You crouch palm flat on black ice and feel the creaks travel up your arm. Underneath, currents drag iceberg teeth against the seabed, a slow-motion grind. Soviet vodka bottles litter these depths, sealed with wax and panic. Your glove snags on a barnacle cluster, each shell sharper than a dictator's promises. Green ripples thicken overhead, the sky now a cathedral of undulating veils. A drone buzzes somewhere, alien wasp disrupting the hymn. Rich kids from Tromso film time lapses, their Instagram captions misspelling solitude. You pocket a frost-bleached crab claw, its hinge still flexing like a stubborn jaw. Flare by flare, the aurora etches shadows onto the ice. Your own silhouette stretches grotesque and wavering, a funhouse mirror version of self. 19th century psychiatrists diagnosed polar hysteria in lighthouse keepers, blamed it on the lights. Magnetism. You hum a Pop-Tarts jingle, an ex's mixtape fossilized in your skull. Something crackles, not ice, but your pocket radio stirring to life. Static hisses, a weather report, fuel spills near Kirkings, then fades. Dial twirling lands on a call-in show, are fjords jazz or classical. A man argues bass lines mimic humpback clicks, host sighs like a deflating accordion. You sprawl on a driftwood log, its salt-rotted core oozing brine. The northern lights bruise purple at the edges, celestial rot spreading. A stranded whaler in 1901 ate his own boots, boiled the leather with lichen. The recipe survives in a Bergen museum. Nobody's tried replicating it sober. Your thermos yields lukewarm cocoa. Its skin forms an iceberg in the cap. You flick it toward the sea. It skips twice before the dark gulps it. 12 years ago, a meteorite plunged into the Lofoten Islands. Locals brewed beer with its melted ice. Critics called it overpriced Schlitz with space dust. Eyelids dip, the aurora smears into watercolor blotches. A snowmobile whine pierces the night, headlight slicing through peat bogs. City archivists digitizing love letters complain of salt corrosion, pages flaking like ancient dandruff. Your own correspondence remains flammable, a comfort in the streaming age. Teeth chatter, not from cold, but the void between wave sounds expanding. You stand, knees popping like desiccated wood knots. The lights fade, their finale a pale smudge above the docks. Soviet vodka, Norse Valkyries, tick-tock auroras, all swallowed by the fjord's inky throat. Back in the shack, you press the crab claw to your ear. False tides whisper. Or maybe it's just your pulse imitating the sea. The stove remains dead, its iron belly full of ash and teen angst. You sketch the aurora in margarine on rye, the bread too stale to taste defeat. Dawn lingers, a procrastinator offstage. Frost etches conspiracy theories on the window. You wipe them away with a sock. Somewhere, a trawler's horn groans, the sound older than Norway's border disputes. Your bedroll welcomes you with mildew and familiarity, its lumps memorized by hip bones. Ice flows clink a toast to the unresolved. Tomorrow's tasks loom mending nets, salting cod, pretending you'll finish Proust. For now, you let the false dawn dye your shutter's green heartbeats sinking to waves as the world pretends to still. The gulls find you first, their shrieks splintering the mist as you round the bend. A cod lies beached, opalescent belly split by rocks, its innards glinting like fool's gold. Birds descend in a feather blizzard, wings smacking your ears as you stagger back. Their king perches on the fish's head, a mess of kelp tangled in his claws. That fish gut necklace isn't decoration, it's rank. You swear the bastard smirks. Decades ago, salted cod built Norwegian wharves, funding stave churches between famine seasons. Now tourists buy it vacuum-sealed with dill stickers. The king's beak stabs the corpse, ripping a tendon that twangs like a broken guitar string. Junior gulls squabble over eyeballs, their turf war soundtracked by wet schlocks. You edge closer, boots sinking into fish-mushed gravel. The king freezes, one yellow eye locking onto yours. Legend says Icelanders left rowan branches for gull chiefs to avoid peck raids. You've got no tree magic, just half a protein bar. Tossing it lands near his talons. He inspects the crumbs like a Michelin critic. Debates rage whether gulls actually follow a hierarchy or just chaos with feathers. This one's crown is seaweed, but the other's weight. He croaks, a sound between drain clog and foghorn, before resuming his meal. The flock dives back in, wings flinging fish scales that stick to your jacket like iridescent lice. Cold salt water nips your ankles, tide reclaiming its stolen prize. The king flaps off, guts dripping from his necklace, as the cod skeleton lifts on a wave. You pocket a stray vertebrae, future paperweight, or regret. Gulls wheel above their cries, thinning into the fjord's humid breath. Another feast tomorrow, always another feast. The vertebrae chafes your pocket, a rough counterpoint to the marsh's soggy size. You veer off path, drawn by a slate-gray slab jutting from the moss. Rain's patient fingers have softened its edges, yet the carvings bite deep. Serpents coil around angular runes, their fangs nipping at letters that once meant mother or morning. Vikings raised such stones for fallen kin, their grief fossilized in rock. You crouch, mud seeping through your knees, to trace a name sanded smooth by centuries. Fingerprints red, what eyes can't, a shallow groove where Elfjafu or Einar once lived. Historians still argue whether serpent carvings warded off evil or just showed off some chisel-swinging artist's ego. Your nail snags on a weathered knot in the stone. Locals claim rune moss blooms blue before storms, a Bronze Age barometer. This patch stays stubbornly green, though the air tastes of pending ice. A beetle scurries from under the slab, its shell glinting like mail armor. You half expect a tiny Viking ghost to ride it into battle. Wind whips through nearby birches, their leaves hissing runic approximations. That's a stretch. But the cold pricks your scalp, an icy mimicry of carved serpent bites. Pocketing the cod bone feels sacrilegious now, like stealing a comma from a funeral ode. Shadows pool in the rune grooves, liquid twilight filling forgotten words. You wonder if the carver's hands shook, if they misspelled beloved and drowned the error in mead. Rain starts needle-thin, smudging the stone's whispered history into something softer, something even a modern tongue might pronounce. Rain sluices off your oilskin as you shoulder into the drying shed, the storm's percussion muffled by cedar walls. Ropes crisscross overhead, strung with salt-crusted flax strips that sway like tattered bridal veils. Each lace drips brine into clay, urns below, a glacial metronome keeping time with the thunder. You press a palm to the nearest strand, crinkled salt flakes patter down like broken glass. Viking traders once bartered such salt for Arab silver, threading their longships through Europe's icy veins. The Hanseatic League paid in linen and lies, but your ancestors' logs show they always skimped on the cardamom. A brittle strip snaps under your thumb, you catch it midair. Locals used to hide salt under doorsteps to confuse trolls, though Oslo psychics now sell it as cursed confetti on Etsy. Biting the strip floods your tongue with the fjord's metallic kiss, iron kelp the aftertaste of 1,000 storms. The shed exhales salt musk as you weave between strands, your shadow fracturing against crystal-encrusted walls. 19th century merchants shipped these laces to Egypt's elite. Their chefs swore Baltic salt cured falcon hiccups. Historians still argue whether Napoleon offered Norwegian salt harvesters tax exemptions or just plagiarized their brine preservation techniques. Moonlight bleeds through a crack in the roof, spotlighting a jar of squid ink on the ledger desk. Your nail flicks the lid. It's been unsealed. Bold move mold. You dab a test smear. The black blooms into indigo. Perfect for labeling crates bound for Marseille perfumeries. Their alchemists will pay triple if you call it midnight ambergris. A strand near the door hums when the wind gusts, tuned to the same pitch as a Sami joik song. Coincidence? You flick it. The note trembles, then dies. 3 quick plucks mimic a robin's dawn call. There, a fledgling skill for your hypothetical post-salt career. Dawn leaks through the planks as you box the final lace, its scent still sharp enough to sting your sinuses. Kyoto tea masters will steep it in matcha Cairo street vendors, will rim their glasses with its grit Parisian heiresses, will dissolve pinches in champagne to taste the aurora. You tape the lid shut, wondering whose tongue will first touch this harvest. The last crate creaks onto the delivery sled, its runners already sweating in the thaw. Crisp air brittles your throat. Frost feathers the shack's eaves like mold on old cheese. You kneel by the final crate, fingers numbing as beeswax seals each jar. Hasidic merchants once smuggled salt in wax-coated barrels, their ledgers claiming it cured melancholy of the spleen. Your thumb leaves a print in the cooling seal, a personal barcode for black market historians. Dawn light fractures through ice-glazed windows, each pane a kaleidoscope of warped rainbows. 19th century harvesters etched messages in frost patterns, their melted runes warning of thin ice. You swipe a glove across the glass, your palm smearing a rude, yet accurate snowflake. The stove gurgles its last breath, peat ash clinging to the iron belly. Outside, the fjord's surface hardens into frosted glass. A harbor seal's snout punches through with a wet crack. You toss salt over your shoulder, an old deterrent against frostbite, or maybe just a reason to glare at squirrels. Jars clink into burlap-lined crates, their labels smudged by your haste. Winter's silent year shares a box with Erica's wrath archivists, will someday debate whether these were storms or ex-lovers. Historians still argue whether Viking salt rites involved chanting or just rhythmic belching. Your money's on the latter. A blackthorn twig snaps underfoot, its thorns gloved in ice needles. You pocket it absently. Oslo hipsters pay well for authentic hygge daggers. The path to the sled creaks, each step compressing snow into glassy whispers. One crate slips, you catch it by the hemp rope, palms burning with friction ghosts. Fox tracks circle the sled, dotted with frozen bilberries like tiny landmines. The beast watches from a snowdrift, its eyes judging your knot-tying skills. You mimic its head tilt, a failed attempt at interspecies negotiation. It snorts and bolts, leaving feathery prints in the powder. Wind riffles through the crate slats, humming that damn joik melody again. 3 jars shift inside their salt, hissing against burlap. Reindeer herders used to stuff their boots with salt, said it confused wolves tracking their scent. You doubt it worked, but admire the optimism. Your breath hangs, a frozen comma mid-sentence, as you secure the final knot. The sled's shadow stretches toward the tree line, a black tongue licking the horizon. Somewhere downstream, an abandoned hut's roof collapses, its sigh swallowed by the cold. You press a warm jar to your cheek, its curve mirroring the sun's faint blush. Marseille perfumers will distill this into something floral, and deceitful Tokyo chefs will pretend it's Himalayan. The crate's latch clicks, shut, the sound louder than any goodbye. Ice splits the silence, a pine branch shedding its crystal armor. Frost numbs your lips as you whisper the harvest's secret name, the one not written in any ledger. Tomorrow, the road south. Tonight, the shack hums with ghosts, straining to hear it. The storm hits like a drunk god, slapping a table, salt, spray, stinging your eyes before you even reach the dock. Your dory bucks against its ropes, every timber screaming in protest. Norwegian shipwrights once used pine tar and reindeer sinew to seal hulls, a trick forgotten when steel steamers arrived. You tighten the fraying mooring line, palms slick with rain and regret. Wind howls through the rigging, a choir of angry widows as waves body slam the pilings below. Fishermen used to nail dried eels to their bows, believed it confused the sea's appetite. You consider sacrificing a protein bar to the squall, but the wrapper would just choke a gull. Each wave lifts the dock wooden planks, flexing like a living thing. Your boots hydroplane across the wet boards, knees wobbling like a newborn reindeer. Historians still argue whether Vikings navigated storms by seaweed ropes or sheer spite. Right now, you try both. The dory's prow scrapes concrete, its blue paint peeling into the froth. You lob sandbags into its belly, their burlap bellies sloshing with desperation. One tears open midair, a grainy explosion swallowed by the gale. 17 pounds of wasted ballast, a petty crime against maritime physics. Lightning forks the horizon for half a heartbeat. The storm looks like a child's doodle of veins. Thunder shakes your ribs. You grab the mast to avoid joining the bait buckets in the drink. Radio towers blink through the downpour, red eyes mocking your analog struggle. Hail arrives, fist-sized ice marbles, hellbent on cranial acupuncture. You jam the copper sieve over your head, its holes imprinting a polka dot bruise. Salt-crusted gloves fumble with the anchor chain, each link colder than a politician's handshake. The dock shudders, a plank tears free and spins into the maelstrom. Your dory lunges starboard, mooring ropes fraying into blonde tassels. You dive for the last intact cleat, cheek meeting wet oak with a thwack that make a dentist wince. Rainwater funnels down your neck, a shiver sprinting along your spine. Some idiot in Bergen once tried to patent stormproof underwear. The prototypes chafed like moral regret. You cinch the final knot, a double hitch that'll either save the boat or garrote it. Waves retreat for 3 breaths, the fjord's surface glinting like shattered mercury. Then the next surge hits, a wall of black water vaulting the gunwale. The dory's bilge pump wheezes, outmatched and underpaid. You bail with a rusted coffee can, every scoop a tiny rebellion. Dawn lingers somewhere east, a rumor behind steel wool clouds. Your thermos rolls across the deck, its dregs of cold coffee baptizing the scuppers. You hum that joik melody again, the notes dissolving before they reach the 7th measure. The storm peaks, wind peeling back the boat's tarp like a sardine tin. Nails yank free, their rusty shrieks lost in the cacophony. You press against the tiller, muscles quivering, until the wood groans like a heartbroken wail. By noon, The gale exhausts itself, waves slumping into uneasy swells. Your dory lists to port, mast cracked, but upright. You peel a soaked mitten, with your teeth fingers wrinkled into something between raisin and relief. Rain retreats, leaving the air smelling of struck matches and wet dog. The dock's survivors creak in chorus, a dirge for missing planks. You slump against a piling, hair crusted with salt and hail dandruff. 3 gulls materialize, circling the wrecked bait buckets with bureaucratic precision. The dory's anchor chain clanks, a weak metronome to their shrieks. You flick a limp kelp strand at them. It arcs through the air like a soggy insult. Tide charts flutter in the mud, their ink bleeding into Rorschach prophecies. Tomorrow's high water could float the boat or drag it into the scary's teeth. You leave the final verdict to the fjord, walking back to shore with salt-stiff jeans and a limp. The shack's door slams behind you, its echo frayed by the storm's aftershocks. You wring out your socks over the stove. A steam rises that smells suspiciously of self-pity. Through cracked glass, the dory bobs, a punctuation mark in the fjord's run-on sentence. The widow arrives at moonrise, her shawl dripping with mist from the marsh path. Cloudberry jam jars clink in her basket, their amber glow clashing with the salt-caked gloom of your shack. She eyes your autumn harvest, 37 jars, stamped with raven symbols from a Hanseatic merchant's seal. They paid Scandinavian fishermen in salted herring coins during the Black Death. She croaks, a fact regurgitated from some Oslo museum placard. You nod, knowing bargaining requires indulging her tangents, and slide 3 salt jars across the table. Her fingers spider over the lids, knuckles pitted with decades of nettle scars. My boy's lungs rattle worse than your storm-wrecked dory, she says, producing a jam jar veined with frost cracks. The trade's unfair, but you pocket the sweetness anyway. Historians still argue whether medieval merchants used salt to preserve treaty scrolls or just pickle aristocratic egos. You add a 4th jar to her basket when she wheezes, its weight tilting the wicker like a guilty conscience. Her cough blooms in the silence, a diesel engine struggling to turn over. She mentions a folk cure involving lichen and cod milk, but it's undercut by the way her shoulders sag against the doorframe. You pretend to examine her jam, holding it up to the kerosene lamp. The light bleeds through the glass of false sunrise, trapped in resin. She departs with salt clinking against her hip, ghost fleet bells tolling for the shore. You watch her dissolve into the marsh fog, a charcoal sketch smudged by rain. The extra jar sways in her sack a pendulum, counting down to her son's next seizure. Your fingers stick to the jam lid, sugar glue bonding skin to survival. The shack smells of burnt caramel and iodine for hours. You spread the jam on driftwood crisp toast, a sacrament to mortal negotiations. The widow's ancestor supposedly smuggled Norwegian salt in fake whale bones during Napoleonic blockades. Or, so claims a mildew-stained diary In Trondheim's attic archive, crumbs fall into your ledger, sweetening the columns of losses and gains. Midnight frost creeps under the door, gnawing at your boot soles. You imagine the widow's son asleep, under reindeer pelts, his breath still hiccuping with phlegm. The fourth jar churns in your gut, a compass needle swinging between charity and cowardice. Wind riffles through your remaining stock labels, whispering all the roads they'll never travel. Parisian chefs will sprinkle this salt on duck confit. Cairo apothecaries will grind it into cure-all tonics. History never mentions the hands that scooped it from tidal sludge, but your ledger does. You light a stub of beeswax candle, its flame guttering in the brine-thick draught. The widow's basket left a ring on the table, a watermark memorializing the deal. Jam's sweetness fades, leaving a metallic aftertaste like licking battery terminals. 3 gulls fight over the empty jar outside, beaks clacking against glass in dividend disputes. Their fury feels scripted, a Greek chorus heckling your mortal theater. You hurl a salt-crusted mitten at them. It lands in the marsh with a wet th-lop. Dawn finds you counting jars again, moving them like pawns on a chessboard gone stale. The widow's extra jar was number 14, a digit that's haunted you since Bergen's train derailment in 1918. Coincidence tastes worse than the kelpash bread hardening on your windowsill. Fog muffles the coast, turning the shed into a lung choking on mist. You twist the jam jar's lid, its pop echoing like a far-off sternum crack. The first spoonful clings to your tongue. A cloying brib wolfhour exhales its frost. Your shack's timbers creak like a ship straining at anchor. Every shadow thickens, turning rope coils into lurking adders and bent nails into wolf fangs. You tighten the reindeer hide around your shoulders, its musk blending with the metallic sting of fierce-wet. Oslo's history museums love displaying Hanseatic salt scales, bronze discs, traded for enough herring to choke a cathedral. You imagine those scales now balanced between silence and the groan of a floorboard. Something scrapes the north wall, a sound like claws testing plywood. Your pulse thuds in sync with the widow's jam jar, still shuddering on its shelf from your mid-throw. Historians still argue whether Viking wolf-hour rituals involved actual predators or just sleep-deprived hallucinations. The dark feels viscous here, syrupy enough to slow the slide of your knife from its sheath. Branches crack, a shotgun rhythm splitting the marsh's breath hold. You flinch, but it's just a fox trotting past with feathers spilling from its jaws. Little thief, its coat mirrors the aurora's green smear above. Folk tailies claim Arctic foxes store plunder in ice caves, hoarding gull quills and soda can tabs alike. You almost laugh until its eyes glint like tarnished spoons, a recognition that prickles your ribs. The stillness returns, amplifying every click of cooling stove metal. You count heartbeats reaching 37 before the wind resumes. Your boot finds a salt crust underfoot, grinding it into the floorboards like a ward. Some reindeer herders swear crushed salt repels lynx, but tonight's predators wear quieter pelts. Dawn's first bruise seeps through the window, exposing your knife hands tremble. Brittle cold has glued your lips shut, forcing breaths through flared nostrils. Your ledger lies open, jam-stained entries blurring into hieroglyphs. Cairo's archive once displayed a 14th century scroll salt-crusted Arabic script detailing Northermatter traders who paid in amber tears. The letters shimmer now, dancing, with the migraine brewing behind your eyes. A floorboard pops, the shack's sly comment on your vigilance. You pivot knife, slashing empty air. Laughter bubbles up hysterical and thin as skimmed brine. Your reflection mocks you in the blackened window glass, a salt ghost clutching cutlery. The fox slinks back, its feather haul now absent. It pauses at the tree line, head cocked, as if hearing a punchline you missed. You salute it, with the knife blade catching a sliver of weak sun. When you blink, it's gone, leaving only indents in the frost. Adrenaline drains, leaving your veins full of wet cement. You slump onto the stool, its legs screeching against salt grit. The widow's jam glistens, a carnivorous jewel in the gloom. You unscrew the lid just to hear the suction pop, a sound that now feels obscenely loud. Spoon to mouth, sweetness floods your tongue, followed by the aftertaste of hospital corridors. You gag, spitting ruby globs onto the stove. The jam's expiration date must drowned in those cloudberry bogs years ago. Wind rifles through the drying shed, snare drumming the salt-crusted ropes. You thumb your phone's cracked screen, no service, just a pixelated wolf howling as the wallpaper. Modernity's a fickle guest here, tucking its tail when frost bites. Blood thrums in your ears, a war drum fading to a nursery rhyme tempo. The shack exhales, settling into its familiar symphony of groans. You press a palm to the wall, feeling century-old sap still weeping between pine planks. Outside, the fox's tracks spiral toward the fjord, each paw print a perfect cipher. You trace them at dawn, finding a flattened circle where it paused. The snow holds no feathers, no proof, but your own thudding heart. Wolf hour retreats, taking its phantom teeth with it, leaving only the crunch of gravel underfoot. Sunlight finally spears the mist, turning the marsh into a shattered mirror. You pocket a fox track cast, salt and plaster, mummifying the moment. It'll sit on your Oslo windowsill, gathering dust, until some future 10, the sieve trembles in your hand, a skeletal thing webbed with salt and rust. Final grains cling like stubborn stars, refusing dawn's pull. You tilt it, gray flakes cascade into a glass vial, their fall echoing the countdown to an eclipse. Centuries ago, Nordic traders buried salt in peat bogs. Archaeologists still dig up these pale troves during motorway construction. Your thumb seals the vial, a cork stopper older than your dead name, worn smooth by generations of harvesters. Wind rifles through the drying shed, its walls tattooed with salt-encrusted handprints. Brine scent clings to your sleeves, a cologne no Oslo boutique would dare bottle. You pocket the vial, its weight negligible against your thigh, no different from a rifle slug or a lover's last letter. Historians still argue whether medieval salt cellars doubled as war charms, their arguments crumbling like bad shortbread. Ice grit crunches underfoot as you cross to the shore. Fjord water licks your boots, its chill seeping through leather, as if testing your resolve. 17 gulls circle a skerry, their cries fraying into the mist. You uncurl your fist, let salt scraps spill into the tide. A deranged 18th century earl once claimed dissolving salt at specific moon phases summoned mermaid accountants. The grains sink, etching brief constellations in the brine before vanishing. Storage crates yawn empty behind you, their wooden ribs casting jail cell shadows. One final jar sits on the pyramid's glass belly, frosted by decades of thumbprints. You unscrew the lid, inhale ozone and ancestor sweat before appending it. Crystal shards skitter across ice like diamond beetles. Fisher folk whisper that abandoned salt curses tides to thin. But your ledger's final page demands this sacrifice. Your pocket buzzes, the vial's presence now a phantom limb. You glance south, where your Oslo flat stinks of mildew and unanswered mail. That plastic ferns still languish, fake photosynthesis for a life you've half revoked. Salt harvesters once paid church tithes in brine-soaked linen. Odd tithe ledgers surface in Bergen attic auctions. You kick a frozen wave, splintering its crest into airborne daggers. Back in the shack, the stove exhales a death rattle. You boil a tin of licorice root tea. Its steam carries the tang of failed root canals. The fox's feather lies where it fell last week, quill nib snapped like a promise. You press it between ledger pages nestled beside a pressed cloudberry from the widow's jam. Modern linguists obsess over salt cognates, how every Indo-European tongue twists it into something sharp, bitter, holy. Dusk arrives early, dragging its violet hem across the marsh. You button your coat, the reindeer hide crusted with salt efflorescence. Old Nils once joked that seasoned coats could season soup, his laugh now ashes beneath Tromso's permafrost. The vial knocks your knee as you walk rhythm sinking with the lighthouse's distant wail. Moonrise finds you at the crossroads, gravel path, south, battling peat, trail east. You finger the vial, consider hurling it into the pines. A 1923 Oslo tabloid reported a farmer who planted salt swore it sprouted into glass trees by midsummer. Your arm drops, defeated by pragmatism, and the itch of wool mittens. Night's full grip tightens, stars shivering like salt on a black tablecloth. You count them, a futile game abandoned at 63. The vial warms in your palm, secrets festering under glass. Tomorrow's bus exhales diesel sighs in the village's route strung between fjord and fluorescent lit oblivion. You bite the cork-free tongue, catching a salt granule that stings like betrayal. 1 shake 2 3. The FL a K E S Chinese letter your teeth, a final communion. Dawn's first blade splits the horizon, its light gilding the empty vial. You toss it into a moss-cradled stream, glass-kissing current, and turn toward the growl of combustion engines. Your pocket gapes, already forgetting what it once held. The fjord breathes its surface, smoothing into a sheet of obsidian glass. You kneel, watch your face float beside the pine's waterlogged skeleton. 17th century sailors mistook these mirrored fjords for portals to the underworld, jettisoned cargo to appease shadows. Your reflection wavers, cheeks wind-carved into something older than your driver's license photo. Bend closer. Salt crusts cling to your eyelashes. Each blink grates like sandpaper on varnish. The pine's branches sway beneath you, drowned roots, combing silt for sunlight it'll never reach. A Vendace fish glides past, its silver flank duplicating itself in the void above. Fishermen here still swear eels read your thoughts through water vibrations. You mouth go away, the creature darts deeper. Ice cracks, a shotgun report shattering the stillness. Your twin fractures, reforms, distorted by ripples. Viking longships once navigated these waters, their prows splitting reflections like shattered ice. Now only ferries cut through, equipped with espresso machines and Wi-Fi passwords. You skim a palm across the surface. Your fingertips blacken. With cold your reflections, fingers curl like bait worms. The pine's trunk looms closer, waterlogged needles glinting like rusted scalpels. Historians still argue whether petroglyphs near Tonsberg depict fishing routes or star maps for the dead. You trace a spiral on your knee, echoing the rock carvings as 3 mergansers arrow overhead. Their wing beats sync with the throb behind your temples. Stand. The world telescopes, fjord cliffs doubling themselves in perfect symmetry. Even your shadow has a shadow here, pale mimic, struggling to keep pace. Your boots sink into shore muck. Each step releases methane bubbles from centuries of rotted kelp. 18th century aristocrats bottled fjord air as a tuberculosis cure. Their glass vials now clutter Oslo antique shops. Something glints in the mud. A pewter spoon bowl warped by decades of tides. You rub its handle, reveal engraved initials, e.g. overrun by barnacle scars. Toss it. The spoon cartwheels, strikes its inverted twin midair, vanishes with a hollow plop. Salt harvesters once buried utensils to mark hidden caches. Dig sites, now fodder for metal-detecting tourists. Wind prowls, the fjord's mirror wrinkles into a funhouse distortion. Your face stretches, melts, briefly becomes your mother's. You retreat upshore, pebbles clattering like dropped cutlery. A single cloud stains the water, its reflection blooming like mold on bread. Sunlight shifts. The pine's submerged crown sprouts shadow branches that claw toward your ankles. You hum a nursery tune about selkies, but the notes flatten against the water's skin. Local legends claim fjord reflections trap unfinished arguments between lovers. You wonder what yours might steal. Kneel again, press your forehead to the water's meniscus. Cold sears your sinuses. Your breath ripples the surface, briefly births 100 shivering doppelgangers. When Oslo divers retrieved a medieval sword here in 89, its blade still held the reflection of the smith's jealous apprentice. The chill migrates to your molars. You recoiled tongue probing fillings for fractures. A tremor, small waves jostle the shoreline. Your reflection shatters into mosaic shards that refuse to reassemble properly. You count the pieces, give up at 29, and lob a stone where your left eye floated. The splash echoes off cliffs returns as a distorted raspberry noise. Sun dips behind Hat Mountain. The fjord dims, 1/2 obsidian, 1/2 quicksilver. You unzip your coat, retrieve the discarded bus ticket from yesterday. It lists 7 stops between here and Oslo each, name more banal than the last. The ink bleeds as you dunk the ticket. Watches cursive letters swell into Rorschach slugs. Darkness wins. Your reflection dissolves, replaced by the first star's tremulous twin. You stand to shake numb legs that taste copper, where the cold split your lip. Tomorrow's storm brews offshore, its pressure already tightening your scalp. The mirror fractures into 1,000,000 liquid shards, each reflecting nothing at all. The shack door sticks, frost sealing its frame like a grudging kiss. You shoulder it, open, inhale 3 months worth of seaweed and kerosene. Salt feathers drift from the rafters, each flake catching lamplight before dissolving on the floorboards. Norway's harvesters once burned juniper to purify air, a fact you wish you'd remembered before brewing your 5th pot of fish-based coffee. Your shadow climbs the wall, stretches into a gaunt giant pouring phantom tea. The tin mug warms your palm, its heat leaching through wool mittens. You sip a grimace, pretend the dregs taste like Oslo's overpriced espresso. A chair creaks empty, as if someone just rose to fetch sugar. Fishermen's widows used to set extra places at table for husbands the sea kept. Wind etches patterns in the salt dust, curlicues that mimic your grandmother's embroidery. You track a spiral, lose its spot, a thimble-sized crab shell under the stove. Biologists insist crustaceans avoid salted structures. Yet, you've swept 6 this week. The stovepipe groans, its metal contracting with a sound like chewing taffy. Moonlight bleeds through cracks of paints the salt jars, lids with silver blisters. You unscrew one, release a briny sigh older than refrigeration. The crystals crunch between your teeth, electric sharpness cutting through the coffee's murk. 18th century glassmakers here added mercury to strengthen jars. Historians still argue whether it poisoned entire villages or just improved the pickling. 3 floorboards north of the hearth, that's where the whispers gather. You press your ear to the wood, hear nothing, then catch a vowel shaped like your childhood nickname. The almanac insists it's termites. The almanac also claims cod make loyal pets. You tap back 3 quick knocks, and the shack shivers like a wet dog. Your bunk sags, its hay-stuffed mattress exhaling spores with every shift. You count knots in the ceiling beams, 19, 20, 21 and a half. Sleep retreats flushed out by the grandfather clock's arrhythmia. It froze mid-chime on day 47, pendulum, rusted into a crooked grin. You peel a splinter from the headboard toss, it toward the ashes. 2 distinct thuds answer. Dawn leaks through fish-skin curtains, the light milky and thin. You knot your bootlaces clockwise, a local superstition to deter hag-riding. The salt cellar door won't budge, its lock clogged with crystalline sweat. You kick it twice, and a pewter spoon clatters down from the lintel. Some say harvesters balanced cutlery to detect phantom pilferers. Others just needed a place to store their spoons. The ledger lies open, its pages warped into tidal wave shapes. You squint at yesterday's entry. 147 jars, 3 seagull incidents memo. Stop naming the gulls. Ink bleeds through to a sketch of the fjord waves, drawn as rows of gritted teeth. A coffee ring stains the margin, its circumference matching your chipped mug. You drip wax over the stain, watch it harden into a miniature glacier. Noon brings false spring, icicles weeping along the roof's edge. You chip one, suck its metallic core, spit gray slush onto the compost heap. A moth flits past, wings powdery as eraser crumbs. It lands on the salt, scale becomes a twin-headed shadow against the wall. Lepidopterists would scribble notebooks for this, but your field guide currently propping up the wobbling table. Dusk arrives early, dragging its belly across the stony beach. You light the hurricane lamp, watch its glow brawl with encroaching shadows. The flame gutters, reveals a handprint on the windowsill, smaller than yours, salt-crusted. You press your palm over it, fingers not quite aligning. 19th century servants chalked such prints to blame phantom thieves. Modern ones just call the landlord. The storm hits at wolf hour, rattling shingles like a gambler's dice cup. Hail tattoos the roof, each impact shouting its own frenetic haiku. You wrap the last jar in burlap, tie it off with kelp twine. Your cargo to Oslo includes combustibles, breakables, and a seashell that hums when held to the ear. The shell's song clashes with the wind, creates a dissonant lullaby for the jars. Final night ashore, silence post-storm feels thicker, a quilt smothering the room. You shed your coat, unravel a moth-nibbled scarf and freeze. The stove's embers sketch a man's profile on the opposite wall, bearded, frowning, gone when you blink. Your fingers brush the salt scale, its brass weights sway like hanged men. The almanac's advice floats back, loneliness is brine for the soul. You sprinkle salt over the threshold, wait, but nothing comes to lick it. First light reveals a crack in the foundation, hairline fracture tasting of iron and regret. You probe it with a teaspoon, hit resistance, withdraw the spoon bent 45 degrees. The floorboards hum when you step, a submarine groan traveling up your shins. Your reflection in the salt jar looks away, ashamed or bored as you pack the last box. The door opens too easily this time, hinges singing nursery rhymes in need of oil. You drag your suitcase over the rock's paws, count 7 breaths. A salt-crusted gull perches on the chimney, its cry smeared by the wind. You consider waving, opt for a nod instead. The shack's remaining specters sip their imaginary tea, waiting to critique whichever fool rents the place next season. The path downstream narrows, crumbling under lichen-furred rocks that shift like bored teeth. You pass the first abandoned hut, its door ajar, revealing a floor quilted in gull droppings and birch leaves. Norway's post-war boom drained these coasts, sent harvesters sprinting to Oslo's docks and factories. Yet no one mentions how the fjords breeze still smells of their last smoked herring breakfast. You kick a rusted hinge. It squeals, sparks, then hums a 2-note dirge. Locals swore iron hinges deterred knockin', water spirits craving human company. Modern ones just blame cheap Soviet-era metal. Salt crusts the window pane, forming a jagged map of some imaginary continent. You exhale, watch your breath fog its borders, and almost miss the snoozing adder coiled in the woodbox. Wall graffiti survives in flakes, red chalk declaring Eric was here beside a lopsided cod. Peeled paint reveals older scrawls, 1923 ship manifests, weather logs, a recipe for lichen beer. Historians still argue whether these huts housed rebellion or resignation. The answer's probably in the mildew pattern no one's paid to decode. A child's mitten fossilizes under the stove, its wool fused to a salt lump. You pocket it, feel the ghost of small fingers flexing against your thigh. 3 rusted hooks dangle from the ceiling. One sways without provocation. Fishermen here hung dream catchers woven from cod sinew. Too bad they never caught a decent night's sleep. Cobwebs drape a tilted chair, silken hammocks for spiders long absconded. You right it, hear the leg splinter, and sit before gravity changes its mind. The table's carved with initials, M+, B inside a lopsided heart. Oslo's archives list 12 Margrethes who married Bjorns between 1948 and 1960. None ever filed a missing persons report for coastal sweethearts. Sunlight stabs through a cracked jar, igniting salt crystals into disco ball speckles. You twist, the lids sprinkle grains into your palm and sneeze violently. A mouse skull rockets off the shelf, final victim of someone's poorly baited trap. The almanac claims mice hate salt, yet this one died, with cheeks stuffed full of it. You trace a fingernail along the hearth, unearthing a half-charred playing card. The Queen of Hearts leers, her crown replaced by a cartoonish squid. Someone's vodka must have fueled this arts and crafts night. Your laugh bounces off empty shelves and startles a thrush nesting in the chimney. Its wings clap like a seasick audience, giving marginal applause. Evening rings salt from the air, dampness gluing your collar to your neck. You light a salvaged candle, watch wax pool around a teacup's fossilized dregs. The flame reflects in a wall-mounted shard of mirror your face, sliced into warped halves. Harvesters believed broken mirrors scared off jealous sea witches. They also believed cod made good listeners. Both theories remain untested. A breeze riffles through rot-softened roof planks, playing the structure like a rotten pan flute. The scent of kelp follows, underlined by something meatier older. You pocket a corroded thimble step onto the porch and reel. Footprints dent the mud barefoot, child-sized, leading toward the tide. The almanac dismisses them as seal tracks. The almanac also thinks you're gullible enough to buy that. Moonrise gilds the fjord, turns the huts into a row of crooked piano keys. You hum a lullaby, your voice fraying on the high notes. Far off, a trawler's lights mimic a fainter constellation. Cities glitter like that, all promise and no payload. You kick a pebble, listen for the splash count, 7 seconds of silence instead. The path home crunches underfoot, each step popping salt bubbles in the mud. A hinge creaks behind you, though no door moves. You turn and glimpse a shadow pressed against empty window glass. Blink, and it's just your own reflection, wider-eyed, paler than you remember. Salt harvesters whispered that huts dream of their owners. But even abandoned houses deserve a night terror or two. Your boots sink with each step, wet sand slurping at your soles like a hungry infant. Legends claim the beach devoured entire villages, women included, for daring to love the sea more than their husbands. 19th century, Norway actually had laws against uncursed unions with natural forces, whatever that meant for bored housewives. A wave glides over your toes, its foam lingers, then retreats with a sound like crumpling parchment. You unearth a mussel shell, its mother of pearl gleaming despite the muck. Fishermen used these as wedding bands for stillborn marriages to the tides. Historians still argue whether salt wives were priestesses, outcasts, or just women who really hated doing laundry. The moon paints a silver road across the water, inviting and threatening as a politician's smile. You follow it ankle deep now, salt crystallizing on your jeans like nature's own glitter. Someone carved a heart into a boulder a century back, HM plus Atlantic 1899. Bold move. HM, hope you two worked out. Kelp wraps your calf, slimy as a bureaucrat's handshake. You shake it off, spot a flicker of white beneath the surface. Divers found porcelain shards here, remnants of torched wedding china from coastal purges. Oslo's National Museum displays a saucer labeled Defiance Service, circa 1823. The curator's notes omit the bloodstain pattern. Your pocket grows heavy, salt from abandoned huts clumping into a damp brick. That child's mitten brushes your thigh again, or is it seaweed? A ripple nearby mimics a giggle. Marine biologists insist it's just gas escaping the seabed. Marine biologists have clearly never been 12 and hiding in a cloakroom. The The water reaches your knees, cold enough to burn. You fumble for the vial of final salt flakes, its glass fogged by your trembling grip. Bridal dower, snorts a voice in your head, probably sleep deprivation, or that third coffee. 18th century widows scattered salt on lovers' graves to ward off aquatic suitors. Didn't always work. Something floats past, a tattered lace, collar bloated with brine. You recoil, then realize it's just a jellyfish impersonating fashion. Down here, they say, salt wives dance in kelp gowns, their bones strung with pearls pried from shipwrecks. The pearls are definitely fake. The loneliness isn't. A wave slaps your ribs, the sea's idea of a playful nudge. Salt crusts your lips' tastes like regret and cheap margaritas. You recall a folktale where a woman dissolved into foam, her heartbeat surfacing as bubbles. Scientists chalk it up to methane leaks. Poets, the terminally single ones, prefer the original ending. Your toes brush a stone column, carved with hook-shaped runes worn smooth. Tide charts, grocery lists, Viking Yelp reviews. A 1990s tabloid claimed it's a map to Nordic Atlantis. They also ran a piece on Elvis herring. The current tightens its grip, your left boot, now a lead weight. You picture HM from the boulder, her hair tangled with crabs, her dowry chest filled with gull bones. Archaeologists found 17 such chests near Bergen, stuffed with shells' hairpins, and one perplexing kazoo. Music soothes the savage sea god, apparently. Lightning stutters on the horizon, or maybe a trawler's distress flare. Your vial slips, sinks, twinkling like a drowned star. Salt wives supposedly collect these, glass coffins for fractured souls. You're down to 3 granola bars and a questionable life choices. The seabed drops abruptly, your footing vanishes. For one stomach-lurching second, you're floating, suspended between myths and hypothermia. Then your heel strikes stone, a submerged path cobbled with salt-bleached bricks. Norway's coastal tour never mentioned this. TripAdvisor would implode. A shadow flickers ahead, humanoid if humans had eel-sleek limbs and hair like oil spills. It beckons, or maybe just adjusts its seaweed scarf. You've read about tidal hallucinations, dehydration, mercury poisoning, FROM, Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. Still, that scarf is fabulous. The path angles upward, your head breaks the surface with a sandpaper gasp. The beach lies 50 meters behind lights from fishing cottages, smearing the cliffs. Something taps your shoulder, driftwood, a curious seal, the ghost of HM's prenup attorney. You wade back, half expecting a hand to snag your ankle. By the time you collapse on dry sand, even the gulls mock you. Your pockets vomit salt shells, that cursed mitten. A crab side-eyes your granola. Salt wives might had the right idea. At least they never packed trail mix. Moonlight sieves through clouds, etching your shadow 10 meters tall against the dunes. You peel off squelching socks, Watch the sea devour them in 2 gulps. Bridal gifts, perhaps. The almanac states dryly, lost textiles fuel coastal superstitions. The almanac owes you 12 krona and a pair of wool blend. Dawn bleeds into the sky, the dissociative beige of cheap hotel walls. Your boots leave deeper prints now, as if the sand remembers each step. Scientists say erosion's inevitable. So are bad marriages. You spit salt, taste the future, and trudge toward coffee. You click the shack's padlock. Its rusted tongue resists until you curse in 3 languages. 19th century law required coastal cabins to use iron locks to discourage mermaid larceny. A gull eyes your backpack's side pocket, where that child's mitten molders next to half a protein bar. The road south unwinds like tape from a broken cassette, cracked asphalt gleaming with morning frost. Your boots, still crusted with salt, leave wet asterisks on the gravel. Norway's old kings once decreed every man must own a seaworthy boat even if he lived in a mountain. Bureaucracy's always been a fever dream here. You pass the skeletal dock, its planks bleaching into driftwood since that October gale. Beneath them, your dory sleeps or drowns. Fishermen used to rub salt into bleeding gums during toothaches, a sting better than rot, they claimed. You try not to imagine the Yelp reviews. Iodine air clings to your scarf. Each breath tastes like licking a battery. That vial of final salt flakes sits empty now, a souvenir for whoever rents the shack next. Historians still argue whether coastal laws were about safety or keeping wives from rowing to Denmark. Both, probably. A truck rumbles past, its bed piled with cod heads for fertilizer. The driver nods. You nod back silence, sealing the compact of people who have survived a winter here. In the 30s, folks buried salt cod in beach sand for months. Let the tide do the curring. Surprisingly sanitary, your thumb brushes the lichen-edged map in your pocket, the one missing the humming boulders and phantom trails. A sign ahead warns of reindeer crossings and something scratched in marker. HM was here 2007. Some romantics never learn. You spit salt. It lands on a fireweed blossom. 34 steps later, you count them. The taste of kelp ash rise surfaces in your throat. A souvenir shop's plastic Viking helmet winks from a roadside stall, its horns wilted by the sun. Beneath it, a snow globe holds a miniature Bergen. Shake it, and glitter mimics snow. 2 on the nose. The bus stop bench has a carved heart, kari plus leif, defaced by a knife. You sit anyway, pick salt from your cuticles. Watch clouds shred themselves on the fjord cliffs. Oslo's just 7 hours south. 7 hours closer to traffic jams vegan lattes people who think fjord is a car model. Wind plucks at your collar, a final coastal whisper. You never found out if salt wives danced beneath the waves, if their pearls were glass, if they regretted swapping village gossip for seal songs. A trucker offers a lift, his radio humming a Burzum cover band. You decline. Walking hurts less. The first road signs in kilometers feel like betrayal. Your pupils shrink under sodium vapor lights. A roadside cafe serves waffles shaped like anchors, syrup pooling in edible lifeboat details. You order two. The waitress, eyeliner sharp enough to fillet salmon, says tourist. You answer, survivor. She laughs, adds extra cloudberries. Tarmac warms underfoot, still miles to go. Your shadow stretches gaunt, a scarecrow fleeing inland. By dusk, you'll hit a town with functioning Wi-Fi, maybe a laundromat. Salt wives never had to Instagram their trauma. Lucky bastards. A plane traces a contrail overhead, businessmen sipping Chardonnay above the cloud layer. You pocket a roadside stone, its edge sharp enough to cut nostalgia. The road thrums, a lullaby of departure. Your tongue finds a salt grain wedged in a molar, one last souvenir. The taste of iodine fades, but never really leaves. Norwegian farewells demand it. You adjust your pack-a-blink, away a mirage of torches on the water, and keep walking. You reach the town as dusk stains the sky, muted purples bleeding into charcoal. The laundromat's fluorescent buzz feels alien. Your salt-stiffened clothes cling like second skin. A guest house window glows, amber its curtains flutter, a wordless welcome. You shed your pack, the floorboards groan in sympathy, and scrub iodine from your nails. The shower's warmth unravels knots in your shoulders, each droplet a pardon from the road. Cloudberry syrup lingers on your tongue, sweetness sparring with that persistent grain of salt. By the bed, your boots stand sentinel, crusted soles, still whispering of coastal frost. You unfold the lichen-edged map, phantom trails softened under lamplight. Wind combs through fir trees outside, a lullaby older than kings or salt laws. The empty vial on the nightstand catches the gloom, its absence louder than storms. You sip chamomile tea, steam curling like mist over forgotten fjords. Lights dim the fjords, breath mingles with truck engines on the highway. Your eyelids dip, the roads hum now, a distant tremor in your marrow. Somewhere, waves gnaw at skeletal docks, salt wives murmur in riptide rhythms. But here now, the world stills. A church bell tolls once, its vibration skimming the roof tiles. The pillow cradles your skull, a mercy after months of driftwood beds. Breath by breath, iodine fades into pine resin diesel sleep. Your thumb brushes the roadside stone in your palm, its edge dulled by pocket lint. Memories blur, the shack's rusted lock a glitter-flecked snow globe's age. M's defiant graffiti, salt never really leaves. It hibernates in scars and storylines. The final thought melts before it forms, a candle guttering in coastal wind. You sink deeper, lighter. Somewhere beyond the mountains, businessmen sip wine above the clouds. Trucks ferry cod heads toward dawn. The sea licks its wounds, and you finally release the shore.